When has a salesman talked himself right out of a sale to you? I was broke, but desperately needed a new car, so I went down to a local dealership to see if they had anything with a monthly payment I could afford. I handed over the keys to my car so they could do an appraisal, but I didn't even get a chance to fully explain my situation before they were shoving me an Infiniti I knew was beyond my price range. I test drove it just to humor the sales guy while explaining that I needed something cheaper than this, but he just kept saying, "We'll see how the financing works out." We get back to the dealership and he tells me he wants to run my credit. The pushiness has already turned me off completely, so I've already decided I'm not buying from them. I tell him no. He looks at me like I just threw crap in his face. "You won't let me run your credit?" he said with stunned incredulity. And then he started calling out to the other salesman. "He won't let me run his credit. Can you believe that?" The other salesmen all shared his shock, like I was committing some unforgivable insult by not letting him run my credit. Next thing I know, I'm being herded into a manager's office, where he starts giving me this spiel about how I clearly don't appreciate how much they're trying to help me out. "But I don't want the car," I said. He continued on like I said nothing, telling me how much they're trying to help me out and how I don't realize what a great deal they can make me. I finally had enough though, so I said, "Listen, I'm not buying that car from you, and at this point, there's nothing you could say or do to get me to buy any car from you, so give me back the keys to my car so I can go somewhere else." And then he actually said to me, "I'll give you back your keys when I'm ready." He realized almost immediately that he had effed up though, because as soon as he said it, he got up and went and got my keys. At that point, I was so enraged that I probably would have punched him if he hadn't gotten up to get them immediately. I drove off and never went back. Story 2. My dad and I were out shopping for my first car. Me being 16 and stupid, I found a used Challenger that I wanted desperately. And to my immense surprise, my dad agreed to co-sign for me. As my dad and I were negotiating the price of the car and what things the dealership could add to sweeten the deal, the salesman implies that I, my father's 16-year-old daughter, was his other woman, and that my 42-year-old father was going through a midlife crisis. My father turned white, and then the same beautiful cherry red of the Challenger. And needless to say, I did not get that car. Instead of getting a cool car that I would have inevitably gotten a surplus number of speeding tickets with, I bought my aunt's '99 Ford Explorer. After replacing parts of the AC system, it runs like a champ. I love that SUV. Edit. The Explorer is a small American SUV. It's bigger than most European first cars. I know it's terrifying that a licensed 16-year-old would drive it, but if it's any consolation, I spent most of my time driving in very rural areas my first 6 years driving. Yes, the insurance would have been absolutely astronomical if I had actually managed to get the Challenger. In hindsight, I'm fairly certain it was my dad attempting to show me how to buy a car from a dealership. 16-year-old me thought he was cool as hell for at least entertaining the idea. My father's not Roy Moore. We're from Georgia, not Alabama. You gotta wait until they're 18 to diddle your relatives in Georgia. Story 3. Was looking to buy solar panels for my house. Got one consultation from a really nice saleswoman who was very friendly, but completely knew her crap inside and out. Had done her research, had printouts of my house's roof from Google Earth, showed me how the panels would lay out, etc. I told her I was going to get a few other quotes, and she said that was perfectly fine, and please just let her know what I decided. So I call around and set up 3 other quotes. First 2 were fine, just more expensive or not as good terms overall. The third place though? Varango Solar. Yikes. I got a call from their sales guy who refused to come to the property, said he could do it all from the office. So he looks at the roof printout and tells me that he can offer around 2/3 of the panels as the other companies. I ask why, and he says, basically, because. So I say 3 other companies are offering between 17 to 18 panels, whereas they will only do 13. He claims they're wrong and gives me some nonsense reasoning. I say, okay, well, at least they're cheap. So I tell him thanks, I'm gonna go over all my options, and I'd call him in a few days. I got calls from him every day for the next 3 days. After 2 days of still thinking, he comes back to me and says he figured out how the other companies got more panels on the roof. They rotated them differently. Go effing figure. On the 3rd day, I said I wasn't interested. Thank you. So I got a call that same day from his manager asking why I wasn't interested. I told him that even though they were the cheapest, their inept sales attitude and extremely pushy manner from every person I talked to there made me never want to do business with them ever. He tried to talk me out of my effing opinion about them, and I calmly told him to, quote, never effing call back here again, please, and hung up. Meanwhile, the nice lady at the other company, now Sunrun, hadn't bothered me once. I called her and said let's do it, and haven't regretted it one day since. She also worked her ass off to get me a very close price to the cheapest option after I told her I was going with her company. It ended up only being like $300 more than the cheapest price. Story 4. I did this once at Sunglass Hut. I was a new employee and was learning about Oakleys. I was shown a thermoplastic pair of shades that are hyper durable and can be bent, stepped on, and completely jacked up, but return to their original shape after. It was sweet. Well, the next day, I'm showing a pair of Oakleys to a customer and want to show the feature. Turns out, I forgot which pair was thermoplastic, grabbed a wire-rimmed pair and stepped on it and the arm came off. The customer was skeptical, but I explained that I was new to the store and that I just grabbed the wrong pair. They bought from me after my honesty. A new pair of the one I had stepped on. Story 5. I recently went through the vehicle buying process. I went to 8 different local dealerships. Every single one of them tried the lowball your trade, demand full price for the new vehicle, tired-ass old-school way of doing business, despite me telling them 1, I used to sell cars too, and know how their game is played, and 2, I wasn't having any of it. One sales manager actually offered $17K when my trade was valued around $25K, then got mad when I laughed at him. Another initially offered 1 trade value, then tried to drop it by $2K via some number manipulation. It's as though they don't realize the consumer has literally every single resource at their disposal, as dealers now, and pricing takes 30 seconds on a laptop with mediocre Wi-Fi. I made 1 email blast with my trade details to a dozen dealerships out of state, with the vehicle I was looking for, and within 4 hours, had numbers and details worked out in writing with the dealership 160 miles away. They delivered my new vehicle the next day, no extra charge, filed paperwork with no bullcrap DOC fees, offered the more up front for my trade than any dealer locally after hours of back and forth, and drove my trade back with them, and beat my previously undefeated credit union's loan APR by 0.8% via their channels. The absolute easiest vehicle buying experience I've ever had. Lesson? Car dealers, it's not 1980 anymore. The game has changed. Story 6. Won a lawsuit when I was 25. Was in need of some kitchen appliances for the place I had started renting with my new housemates. Been 2 years. I had $15K in the bank that, due to my being in short-term disability at the time, had to go ASAP or I would love the medical coverage I had. Went to Sears. I dressed like a farmer. Jeans, work boots, and a clean but well-worn shirt. Guy spends 10 minutes glancing over at me while pretending to be on the phone. Someone else comes in. He rushes over to help them. They look at me, confused, and I shrug. I walk next door to a place called Marty's Discount Appliance and Decor. 10 minutes later, I'm walking out, shaking hands with the saleswoman who helped me find my stuff, and her coworkers start rolling out the stuff I bought. French door refrigerator, double doors on the top with the freezer drawer, washer, dryer, stove, upright freezer, we raise hogs for meat, need the space, dishwasher, wood stove, 3 electric water heaters. Sears guy is outside smoking. Think he inhaled his butt. Still had enough money left over, and I was able to take my housemates out for dinner every night for a week. Story 7. Husband and I were at a furniture store. This was just before buying our first house, so we needed everything. The sales guy in the showroom seemed great. He was very friendly and helpful when talking to us. We asked him to price up what we needed: a dining table and chairs, a TV stand, a sideboard, and a coffee table. It came to nearly 2,000 euros. This was a little over what we wanted to spend, so we told him we'd just have a few minutes to ourselves to talk about it. He was like, sure, no problem. Then proceeded to walk over to a group of his colleagues and very loudly say, watch and learn, fellas. This is how you make a sale. Got them in the palm of my hands. Then carried on talking about how great his sales pitch was and how we were falling for it. I don't know if he thought we couldn't hear him or if he just didn't care, but the comments rubbed me the wrong way. Hubby gave me a look that showed he wasn't impressed either, so we both just walked out of the store. We drove to another branch where a lovely young girl put our order through and gave us a free 5-foot mirror as well. I wish I could have seen the reaction when we walked out of the store. He was so certain we'd buy with him. Yeah, don't do the victory lap until you close the deal. I guess it's one thing to feel confident in your ability to pitch a sale, but to loudly make a comment like that before you're finished, I would probably walk out of there too. Story 8. I've began researching my next car. I'm not looking to make a purchase for the next few months, but I'd like to do my homework. I had a couple meetings cancel one day, so I decided to run by the closest Hyundai dealer to see their new hybrids in person. I'm currently a Honda guy. I had a great conversation with the actual salesman. Good test drive, and he understood my plans. We returned to the dealership, and I grabbed a booklet on the Ioniq as he went to take the keys back and find me a business card. In the meantime, his sales manager approached me and asked 4 times what he needed to do to get me to leave in a new Hyundai, refusing to listen to what both the salesman and I were saying. To top the visit off, the manager grabbed my hands and began to pray that I would wise up and get me a Hyundai. Over the next 36 hours, I received 11 phone calls and text messages from the dealership harassing me about getting back in to buy and eventually accusing me of only going in for the test drive gift card promotion that I wasn't aware of. Story 9. Went to a Mercedes dealership and was looking at cars. Decided I was going to get one. While talking to the sales guy, I texted my stepdaughter to come pick up my original car and drive it home so I could drive the new one home since she was about to finish her classes just up the road at university. It took her a while to show up. So I'm a large white man. My stepdaughter is mixed, half white, half black. When she came into the showroom floor, she walked over and was looking at a car. The sales manager and salesman who were in the room with me looked out, and the sales manager comes out and says, "Oh, wow, hey, look over there," to the salesman and me. I see he's talking about my stepdaughter. I kind of half smiled, not because I'm amused by what he said, but because I know where this conversation is about to go. And without a second hesitation, he tells the salesman, "She's hot. She looks like she has a little white in her." And the sales manager then looks at me with a side glance and says, "I'd like to put a little white in her." You know what I mean? I stood up. By large white man, I mean I'm 6'4", 220 pounds. I was in the middle of reading through the sales contract when I just slowly started to tear it up and put it on the desk. Never said anything to them. Just stared at them a very uncomfortable amount of time, until they both just kind of stood there looking at the floor, walked out, and left. Story 10. Wow, my car story feels dumb by comparison. I was on the phone, like literally yesterday, to a dealership to arrange a test drive of a X car. Salesman: "We don't have a demo for that car model. Why don't you drive Y? It's more or less the same." Y is not more or less the same. I'm looking at a sportier model, so the engine, suspension, etc., you know? Me: "No, why on earth would I test drive one car and buy another?" S: "But sir, it's more or less the same." Me: "Dude, it literally isn't, or I'd be looking to buy Y and not X." Brusquely. S: "Well, sir, no dealer's going to let you test drive generic sportier variant of their car." Me: "That must be why I've already test driven the other 3 contenders on my shortlist, right? Well, the list just narrowed down to 3. See ya." And that's the story of how I had to threaten legal action to stop desperate salespeople from this dealership calling me non-stop for 24 hours, including well outside regular business hours. Story 11. Was helping my dad through the process of buying a car because his English is pretty bad, and he also doesn't know much about cars. Spent time doing adequate research and calling around. Went to the dealership and luckily got someone that spoke my language. I'm purposely refraining from identifying language to not reinforce any racial stereotypes. Salesman talked to us in both English and the other language. Confirmed details and price and was about to run a credit check and sign. When they were going to get the paperwork, saleswoman suddenly mentioned that the model they actually had in stock was an older one, still new, not used, and did not have some of the features that were originally agreed on, but they would still give it to us at the same price. What? First question out of my mouth was, why would we pay the same price for something older and with less features? Salesman ignored me and started talking to my dad in the other language, trying to upsell him. I understand the language, but had only been conversing in English this whole time. I interrupted and repeated my question. Salesman got flustered and continued to ignore me and more aggressively talk to my dad only. I interrupt with a more stern voice. "Excuse me, but that makes no sense why we're paying the same price for less." Salesman becomes upset with me and says in English, "What's the problem? I don't understand. You're not even the one paying for it. He is." I was an adult in my mid to late 20s at the time. Yes, I was offended on multiple fronts, mostly at the blatant, outright attempt at scamming my dear old pops. I cut Salesman off again and lied. Actually, I am the one paying for this. It's my car, and we're done. I nudged my dad to follow as I stormed out while the salesman stood up, but stayed at the desk while repeatedly yelling out to us in English, "What's the problem? It's the same price. What's the problem? Hey!" Story 12. My mom, sister, and I went to the AT&T store to upgrade our phones a couple years ago. We decide on the phones and tell the saleswoman we're staying on our current plan, which at the time included a no-charge phone upgrade. As we stand at the front desk, the saleswoman gives the paperwork to upgrade to my mom. I'm curious about it, so we go over it together. I see that they wanted to not only charge us for the phones, but charge us the upgrade fee, which is the part that's supposed to be free, by the way. They also tried to automatically change our phone plan to a more expensive one and charge us a transfer fee, where they put our numbers and plan info into the new phones. I asked what that was all about, and they tried to feign ignorance. We're not doing anything but giving you guys new phones. And more malarkey that I can't remember right now. After arguing with her for 5 minutes about it, I finally got the truth. So I grabbed the paperwork from my mom, gave it to the saleswoman, and said, "Congratulations, you just lost a sale. We're going to the Apple store where they'll do everything you wanted to charge us for free." We went to the Apple store where they only charged for the new phones. I've had similar experiences with AT&T, ultimately canceled them about 10 years ago and have never looked back. So it's interesting to hear that, I wasn't just like a one-off. Apparently they just suck. Story 13. When I was in high school, I was preparing to do a study abroad in Quebec, circa 2006. My mom wanted to buy me snow boots because of the snowstorms that hit up there at the time. So we walked into one store so I could try some on. The boots I chose had Gore-Tex, came up to my calves, and were so comfortable to walk in. Regardless, I needed to break them in, but for $89.99, they were a steal. My mom and I told the floor salesperson helping us that we would be purchasing the boots. That's when my mom remarked about how reasonable the price was, and the salesperson gave my mom this weird look. She said, "You think $189 plus boots are reasonable?" Now, my mom and I are totally confused. We pointed out that the sticker price on the bottom of the boots read $89.99, and the salesperson lost her crap. She told us, quote, "If I let you walk out of here paying that price, I get an email from the company tomorrow morning demanding why." That ruined the sale. She refused to acknowledge that this was a mistake on the store's part and honor the price, nor would she check the computer for the true price. As far as we're concerned, she was just making crap up so she could make a couple $100 sale. I put on my shoes, handed her the box, and told her she was unprofessional as we left her standing in the empty store. I ended up getting the same boots from the manufacturer's website on sale and with free shipping. Story 15. I was looking at buying some speakers and the sales guy came over and wanted to demonstrate the sound. Standard sales tactics, so I let him put on a song. He dissed me instantly when I mentioned I prefer to hear something like Eminem and put on the Arctic Monkeys instead, so I already didn't like the guy. While I was listening to the music and pondering the price of the speakers, the guy then started talking about how he has a state-of-the-art entertainment center in his huge house, and he's just upgraded everything. He started telling me how much it all cost and how his wife has decided she wants to upgrade their in-suite bathroom and how much he'll be paying for that. I can't stand people talking about how much money they've spent on something. It usually says to me, you either have no money or you're an imbecile. After he started talking about the layout of his house, I think he wanted me to rob him, I politely ended the conversation and walked out of the store. The guy was on minimum wage and working on commission, so unless this crappy sales tactic actually works, I have a feeling he can't afford any of the crap he was talking about. TLDR, wanted to buy some speakers, sales assistant on minimum wage came over and started bragging about the thousands of pounds he had just spent on his home, and I think he wanted me to steal from him. Story 16. About a year ago, I was looking to purchase a new car. I went to this dealership off the south side of town that they do a lot of third-party sales for vehicles. I went to go check out this Ford Ranger, and it had a whole slew of problems. From the outside, it would be great. However, once I was finally able to get the door open, it was a completely different story. The locks were busted in, either stayed stuck, locked, or didn't lock at all. When I opened the driver's side door, it creaked and had tension on it, as if there was frame damage and the whole thing's been shifted. When I started the truck up, it took a couple tries to get it to actually click over, and then blue smoke poured out of the tailpipe. At that point, I had seen enough and was trying to get out of the truck, and the guy selling it comes up to the driver's door, blocking me in. He starts telling me all about how this is a great truck and it's reliable and dependable and will get me anywhere. He keeps pushing for me to take it for a test drive. At this point, I had an off and told him there was no way in hell I was going to buy the truck. It clearly had some sort of terrible oil leak. The whole thing just screamed death trap. A few minutes later, me and my dad are a couple rows over talking to a different guy about a different truck, and we see the little green Ford Ranger putter out of the parking space and immediately die. Oh yeah, safe and sturdy my ass. Story 17. A month or so ago, I was at a vape shop a few towns over. I was already in the area and thinking about a new mod, so I wandered in to see the selection. Saw one I liked, can't remember the name on it, but a pretty simple box mod with an American flag engraved on the back. I'm no patriotic guy. I actually think the big deal made over the flag is hilarious, but I don't mind the imagery when it comes to a simple vape box. As I'm about to say I'll take it, the guy behind the counter goes, and the best part is, you can take it to the game to show those America-hating leftists you're a real effing American. If it hadn't been for his tone, I would have thought it was a complete joke, but he was dead serious, and honestly sounded a little angry. I just put it down and left. Now, I'm a left-wing guy, but not so far as to stop going to businesses just because employees hold slightly different worldviews. But leave it on your own effing time. I said nothing about politics, and you got volatile and jammed your idea down my throat. I work at a vape store. I have a lot of military and civilian Republicans who like Trump. We would disagree on damn near every political topic if we were to talk about it, but we have a common understanding that we don't agree, and that there's no real need to talk and agitate one another. Just leave your politics at the door when you walk into work. If a customer brings the topic up, have a normal conversation with them, but if they're just quietly checking out a product, don't burst into a mini political rant. Story 18. I went to get used tires, a set of 4 for about $200-ish. I called ahead of time and said I was coming to see them before I buy them, and he's like, okay. I go to the place and he tells me to go around back. At the back, it's a warehouse of tires and some guys installing some on one car and another guy waiting. Okay, sure. This is before work and I got a couple minutes. The guy takes 5 minutes to come to the back. Talks to the waiting guy who's buying brand new tires and ignores me. He offers that guy to go see his brand new ones, and I follow along even though he barely acknowledged me. Now I wanted these tires. It would have saved me so much, and all I wanted was to look at them for 3 minutes. He takes the guy to the front via the unit and talks to him, and they take their time. I'm there. The guy that was waiting leaves, and the gentleman texts and answers his phone. After he hangs up, I ask him that I want to see it. He gives me a BS answer of, yeah, we got tires in and outs. Then a new guy comes in the store and they completely ignore me and start talking about sizes and what would fit and are generally undecided and slow. Okay, sure, half an hour has gone by. He's finally done and I ask him again. He's like, follow me. So I go to the back of the unit with him and he instantly starts helping the guys who were doing the wheel install, saying, why is it here? Should be out already. I'm like, WTF? Paying customer here. I just get in my car, rev my engine and pull off. Head to another store and dropped $800 on new tires instead of the $200. Plus, I was not an hour late for work too. Story 19. Crashed my first car after 8 years of driving it. Insurance company appraised it as better than Blue Book value during the claim process, and it could either be repaired and never as safe again, or totaled and I would get a check towards replacement. Despite my attachment to it, who doesn't get attached to their first car, the reduced safety made the decision easier. Get a ride from my parents on my mom's birthday, still feel terrible for that part, to the dealers in town to look at my options. First stop was the Ford dealership, because mom was pushing for an American car, and after I told the dealer what I'm interested in, small, medium-sized car, importance of miles per gallon, second only to safety rating, he says he knows just the car for me. I was in my mid-20s, and while I do tend to get told I look younger than I am, I in no way look like a high schooler. He proceeds to show me this flashy POS that gets below average mileage because it's, quote, popular with teenagers, and has adjustable interior floor lighting. He then proceeds to focus the entire conversation on my parents instead of me. I already had a negative opinion of the Ford company because of how they handled the Pinto, and I had recently read the book A Savage Factory, but his lack of attention to what I said I was looking for cost him and the dealership a sale. Went across the street to the Hyundai dealership and got a crap ton of discounts on my current car. Now, the Hyundai dealer is costing themselves future business by calling me every year to ask if I'm, quote, ready to upgrade. I had my last car for 8 years and would still be driving it today if it weren't for that accident. I'm not getting rid of my current one just because there's a newer model. Story 20. We're buying furniture with the money from our wedding and really liked a set that was 10% over our range. The girl ran the numbers and with tax and delivery it just wouldn't work. I realized delivery was unnecessary. Texted my dad to make sure he could help me move some furniture, Quick response, yes. Texted the friend with the pickup and waited to see what he'd say. We take a seat and are basically waiting to hear if we can use a truck, and if we're 100% buying this couch, love seat, and ottoman. The salesman just blurts out, just buy it, do it. I sort of laugh, assuming she's being tongue-in-cheek. She leaves to do whatever, comes back, and without looking up from her phone again goes, just do it, buy it. That pisses me off, so I glance at my wife and she's irritated too. She texts me that if we get the truck, we're running our sale with another salesman. Still nothing from the guy with the truck. We start wandering around looking at lamps and rugs and other crap we don't want, and she doesn't notice we're gone. We wander back to our couch set, and when she sees us, she says, "Are you buying this yet?" Nope. Bye. Story 21. I work for a group of different auto dealerships. The time came for me to trade in my truck and get something newer and more reliable. I spoke to the sales manager about my situation, and he said he'd appoint a salesman, then we could work the deal throughout the day. So I meet with the salesman, give him my preliminary information and my truck keys for the appraisal. He knows the deal. I said, "Come find me when you need more info. I'll be working." Not once did he come find me through the day. Every hour or so, I'd walk up front and say, "So, any updates?" And I'd get some bullcrap response like, "Oh yeah, we're still working on it," or "They haven't told me how much your trade-in's worth yet," etc. At the end of the workday, 9 hours, he told me they couldn't make a deal. Couldn't explain why. Don't even think they ran my credit, as I never saw the inquiry. I walked across the lot to another one of our dealerships. They took my information, and the next morning I came in, gave them my truck, and parked my brand new car in the employee lot that day. Once word got around that I didn't buy a car from the store that I work in, a lot of managers started coming up to me and asking what the deal was. I explained the situation. There was a meeting the following morning about my situation specifically and how royally this salesman effed up because he let probably the easiest deal walk out the door to another of our dealers. The salesman didn't work for the dealership much longer. Story 22. I went to a furniture store because my girlfriend and I wanted an actual bed frame instead of a cheap metal one from Walmart. We walk in, the lady asked what we were looking for. We said bed frames, and she told us where to go, some of the deals they had and such. After we talked a bit, she walked away and we looked around. Gets worse. She pretty much followed us around the store, trying to act like she wasn't, but we could tell. She'd slowly look at some of the displays and walk slow, and when we stopped to look at a bed frame, she saw us and came up to try and sell us on something. We kept going through the store and she kept following. Eventually, we ditched her and we felt free. We came around to something later and saw her again and we got annoyed. After that, we were like secret agents trying to get out of a building without being noticed. Once she turned her back, we walked straight to the door and left. We just went next door to IKEA and got a good-looking bed frame there for a lot cheaper price. Story 23. I used to work at Costco. They put me at the credit card table by the door, and I told them flat out I won't sell something I can't stand behind. They said stop complaining and do your job. I spent about 6 hours having fantastic conversations with fantastic people, asking questions to see if our credit card could benefit them. 99% of the people I talked out of it, pointing out exact reasons why another option would serve them better. At the time, I was taking basic finance classes, and I was just so excited to give informed advice on real-life situations. I got a lot of handshakes and thank yous and some delightful older people who just wanted to quiz me. My manager wasn't happy. We're supposed to sell the cards, obviously, and especially to people my age, 20. But they kept putting me back at the table, and 3 days later, after several talkings to and me saying I'm not going to lie to people who won't benefit, they put me back in my department. So I talked roughly 50 people out of a sale. This one guy, about 50-ish, was missing out on some major travel deals though, and I got him signed right up. Story 24. Was shopping for a new car. I went to a dealership, really liked one car, but wanted to think it over. The salesman seemed nice enough and wasn't pushy. He gave me his number so I could arrange an appointment when I decided to come back. My dad insisted on coming with me to the second visit. He loves car shopping, for some strange reason. I tried to make an appointment with the same salesman, but he had a family emergency and wasn't there that day. He deferred me to his manager. Said manager deferred me to an overly sleazy salesman. This guy would talk over you when you tried to ask a question. Finally, my dad calls him out on it. Boy, you're just annoying. Well, so are you, retorted the salesman. I got up at that point and said forget it and that I wasn't buying from them. I left after that. I texted the first salesman out of courtesy to let him know I was no longer buying from them. Then I get an alert from Credit Karma. Apparently, the first salesman pulled my SSN from my current vehicle loan. I was financing my current vehicle from the same manufacturer I was shopping for, and ran a hard credit check without my consent. I had not filled out any forms, nor signed any documentation during this whole ordeal. I guess that whole place is sleazy. I still like that brand, but I'm never shopping from that dealership again. Yeah, when you go to buy a car, you have to be willing to play hardball. Print out quotes beforehand and don't let them push you around. At the end of the day, they have a hell of a lot more to lose than you do. So play the leverage game and get out of there if they're jerks. Story 25. I, a late 20s single female, just bought a house. The first 2 weeks were a flurry of door-to-door salesmen trying to sell security systems, solar panels, satellite TV, you name it. Mostly I'd open the door and say, "Oh, no thank you," and they'd go away. But this one security system guy kept trying to invite himself in. Kept coming back at weird hours, like 6:45 to 7 a.m. or 8 p.m. After the third or fourth time I told him to get lost, I actually had to call his boss and tell him not only was their employee harassing me, was never and will never be welcome on my property, but that he creeped me out so hard he drove me to have a system installed by a different company. He sounded weirdly pleased when I said that. When I called the other company, I found out that the first company didn't even exist. It was a sham to drive people to the real one, advertising for security systems by making people feel unsafe in their own homes. How did I find this out? The guy who creeped me out so hard answered. I now have an extremely robust smart house and security system that was self-installed. F paying for monitoring anyways. All I need to do is yell, "Siri, call 911, and I'm covered. Story 26. Me and my wife had been looking at houses to buy as part of an open day. Basic premise is 20 or so people all follow an agent around 5 houses in one day, then negotiate if they want to buy one at the end of the day. As the day came to a close, we decided on house 4, and another couple, who we had made friends with throughout the day, were also in the store negotiating on one of the 5 houses. As we were deciding what offer to make on the house, the estate agent quietly suggested upping our offer by 10,000 euros because the couple in the store also just made an offer. We agreed and upped our offer, and as she went into her office, we caught eyes with the couple and jokingly said, "Looks like we're going for the same property." They were not. We called out the agent when she returned, and the other couple said they were not going for the property. Agent basically froze and tried to apologize. She had lied about competition for the property, and we were the only bidders for this particular property. Tried to make us pay 10,000 euros more, as naive early 20s first-time buyers. Story 27. This is a long one, so bear with me. I was looking for a new truck. I had a reasonably good down deposit, about $6,000, and had been working with a dealership that my parents have used my entire life. I told them what I was looking for, most likely used, but to keep his eye open for good deals on new trucks, and that I was looking to finance no more than $29,000, approximately $450 a month depending on interest rate, with a trade-in of a 3-year-old car that I still owed on. I start browsing the web and see a brand new 2017 Silverado for just under $36,000 at a rival dealership. I'm a numbers guy, so I knew what I needed to get out of the car to get to my financing goal. Cue calling rival dealership and asking to speak with a salesman. He sets up an appointment to look at the truck and asks me to text him pictures of the trade-in and the VIN. So I do that, and he replies with, "I'll be as upfront as I can. What you want will not happen. Typically, new truck payments are in the neighborhood of $600 to $700. So there's just no way to get to $450 a month with your down payment and that trade-in." I responded as tactfully as I could, because every salesman knows you say what you need to get me in the door, and told him that it needed to happen, or at least get close, or I would go somewhere else. He responded with, "Sounds good." What a dick. Then he texts me back a couple hours later and says, "Look, I'm just trying to be as respectful of your time and my time as I can be, and there's just no way it'll happen." So I replied and told him, "If you don't think you can get close to where I need to be, go ahead and cancel the appointment to view the truck on Monday morning." He replied with, "Okay," not even trying to keep me there or anything, just okay. I've never wanted to stab someone through a phone before, but I did want to that day. So I text the salesman at the original dealership and say, "Hey, insert rival dealership name here, has the same truck that's on your lot, just a different color for $36,000. If you can price match that and get me to where I need to be, I'll come see the truck Monday. He says, we can absolutely price match. Come on out. So, long story short, I get what I wanted at original dealership for $430 a month, financing $29,000 for 72 months. And just to be an a-hole, I took a picture of my shiny new truck and sent to the asshat at the rival dealership and said, just got this at the original dealership, $430 a month. Maybe if you hadn't been so rude, I would have bought it there. He did not reply. Dick. Oh, and I called his manager and told him that salesman probably cost him a sale. He was not very happy. Story 28. I know my tech, inside out and upside down. I needed to buy a laptop for my wife, so I head on to PC World. I'm looking for something with decent integrated graphics so she can play some low-level games, browse social media, and do some occasional document writing. Nothing heavy. Didn't need an i7. She'd never tax it enough. i5 would be just fine. Didn't need any more than 8 gigabytes of RAM or 1 terabyte of hard drive. I looked online and the one I wanted was 500 euros with all that. Insert salesman to the process. Know what's more dangerous than a little knowledge? A medium bit of knowledge, but some arrogance and a requirement to sell. Told me that the one I was looking for was an old model. It wasn't. Told me that if I wanted future proof, I should go i7. That's not true. Told me that the new advances in graphics cards and laptops made them just as good as desktops. No. Sorry, Mr. Salesman, but you can't get me to buy your €1,200 i7 laptop with a 760M card, claiming it will be better than what I have at home. Stop talking crap. I went elsewhere. Honestly, if you didn't know your stuff, it was quite convincing. I may just adapt the Ron Swanson approach when he's in a DIY store of, I know more than you. Story 29. I work in business-to-business sales, so I'm always looking to see what sales techniques are being used on me when I'm going to buy things, like a car. About 7 months ago, I was in the market for a new car, and I knew exactly what I wanted. I emailed different dealerships to get pricing and an offer on my trade-in. Like many in the digital age of buying a car, I made it clear I wouldn't walk in the door before I had a price. I get a written offer from a dealership about 5 hours away from where I live. The price is great, but not suspiciously low. We schedule an appointment for the following weekend, and I get to the dealership early. This is where the fun begins. After test driving the car and confirming everything, we sit down to finalize the paperwork. They rescind their offer on my trade-in and offer a few thousand less. Additionally, they mention that there is a pricing error on the car they'd offered me, so the price is higher. I'm beyond insulted. The car on their lot is now squarely out of fair price territory, and their excuse for my trade-in is bullcrap. My guess is they figured that since I'd driven so far, I'd suck it up and take the deal. Nope. I get up to leave and walk out of the door. The closer chases me down and says they'll work things out. I give them the chance, and their best offer is $200 off the new price they put in front of me. I tell them no. There was an offer in writing, and I'm either taking that deal or no deal. They tell me they cannot do that deal, and that no one else can. I leave, and I never hear from them again. Going back to my research, I find a small dealership in a small town 4 hours away that has what I'm looking for. The salesman is great, doesn't pull any ridiculous salesy tricks. We make a deal, and I'm the happy new owner of my dream car. Story 30. We were looking to buy a used MX-5 Miata, and the first one we went to see was at a used car dealership. When we got there, we could instantly see there was rust in all the bad places, and the photos online had been taken strategically to hide it. That was a huge red flag, but we decided to test drive it anyway, even if just so we had something to compare the others to. My girlfriend is a project manager for Nissan, and we're both patrol heads, so we know what we're doing. We had also done stacks of research on the car already, to identify the bad things to look for, etc. The dealer bullcrapped us like mad from the moment we arrived. The dampness was because his colleague left the window down in the rain that morning. Oh, really? So not the common problem of the vinyl roof leaking? The rust was just surface, and they could get that sorted out before we took the car away. So just gonna blow over that rather than sort out the actual problem, which is inside the double skin rear arch? The worst thing was when we asked to test drive, he said the fan belt was damaged, so it couldn't be driven right now. For a dodgy fan belt? But if we wanted to leave a deposit, we could come and test drive it the next weekend. Leave a deposit for a car I've never even seen move? We laughed in his face and walked away. Story 31. Scene. Fiance and I are looking for a home, renting for the time being. Find perfect home on Craigslist. Big yard for our big dog, less than a mile from our jobs, $1,000 less per month in rent than we were paying for 2 apartments. Cool. Call Mr. Landlord up. Hello, Mr. Landlord. We'd like to rent your home that's for rent. We proceed to have a nice friendly chat where he asks specific questions such as, where do you work? Where does your fiance work? What's your dog's name? What time do you want to meet tomorrow at the property that I own? He was very specific about this being the only house he owned, aside from where he lived. The next day, I call Mr. Landlord at the prearranged time, 30 minutes before we were to be shown the house. He does not answer the phone. I leave him a voicemail, and we continue to look at ads. Finally, my fiancé decides we should call him back because this is a great house, and she does. Approximately 4 hours after we were supposed to meet him, Mr. Landlord answers the phone and, "Hi, we were supposed to come to the house earlier and you told us to call before we came over. We wanted to make sure the house was still available." "Yeah, I don't know why you didn't come to meet me." "Huh? He asked us to call, right? We're certainly not going to just show up at a vacant property without invitation." "Well, we're still interested if that's an option. I'm at another house right now. Probably won't be around for a couple days. How about you let me know when you're free? I'm surprised this house has been on the market as long as it has. It's a great location and a great deal. 2 weeks, 4 missed apartments, literally the same conversation. Who are you? What do you do? How much do you make? And a no-show at the arranged showing time. Wouldn't have tried so many times if it wasn't such a sweet deal and we didn't have a luxury of time for our move. TLDR, landlord doesn't know how to sell a house. Story 32. Anytime they attempt to interact with me more than once, 9 times out of 10, I know what I want before entering a store or a sales situation. If I don't, I will ask you. If it is a product involving tech, sports, or kitchen/culinary equipment, I already know more than the idiot trying to sell me something. If it's something expensive like a house, car, or other extravagance, I've done enough research that I already know more than the idiot trying to sell me something. I appreciate that you have a job to do, which is why I will very politely decline your first attempt to assist me. Try again and I'm gone. I'll give my business somewhere else. I don't enjoy haggling unless it's on my terms. I'll tell you what I'm willing to pay and you can match it, better it, or offer me an alternative which incentivizes me to change my mind. If you try to blow smoke up my ass, I'm gone. Lie to me about something and I'm gone. Life is too short to waste time listening to bullcrap from aggressive sales assistants with quotas to meet. Gone are the days of limited options. We have a thing called the internet now, which has rendered your profession obsolete. Story 33. I'd finally convinced my technophobe mother to get me and my siblings an Xbox 360. The two of us, Mom and I, go to one game shop and are quickly scooped up by a salesperson working there. Despite us trying to keep it simple and cheap, the salesperson pushes and pushes and pushes the extras. Increased hard drive, extra controllers, warranty extras, 12-month online pass, all kinds of crap. We're more of a let us tell you what we want or F off family, so walk out buying nothing. You know it's bad when the starry-eyed kid has had enough. We go one town over, try another shop in the same company. Salesperson there listens to what we ask for, only brings us that stuff, and made exactly 2 suggestions. 1, try the Slim for all the built-in stuff. We said no once due to cost, and he dropped the suggestion. And 2, get the rechargeable battery kit, to which we said yes. All told, I think we spent like over 90% as much in store 2 as we were being offered in store 1. But damn it, the principle applies. Let us shop. We'll tell you what we want. Story 34. One time, I was walking through a mall and passed a cosmetics counter. The girl working there was handing out lotion samples, so I mindlessly grabbed one and tried to keep walking. She stopped me, grabbed my hands, and started rubbing lotion all over them. I said, "Oh, I'm not trying to buy any lotion, I just wanted the free sample," and tried to walk away. But she held my hands tighter and kept rubbing more and more lotion on them. She said the bottle was only $40, and I said that's too much to pay for lotion. She then looked me up and down and asked me how much my shoes cost me. I'm sorry, but the second you try shaming me for how expensive my clothes look, you've lost my business. Oh, and don't rub crap on my hands without my permission? Yeah, this one's kind of weird. I mean, beyond just like rubbing lotion into your hands, like, don't touch people. Like, unless it's extending a hand for like a handshake or something like that. little bit more formal and there's some mutual consent involved, yeah, don't touch your customers. Story 35. I was in the market for my first car, had done tons of research on ones I could afford, and had narrowed it down to 2 models. I found a dealership in the area that had both in stock, so I went to do some test drives. I was just out of college at the time, and as often as not, car guys tend to be pretty condescending to ladies in general. This salesman was one of those, but while it grated on my nerves that he was talking over my head to my then boyfriend instead of to me, the purchaser, I sucked it up and took the first of my 2 test drives. When we got back, I asked to try the other model I was interested in, and I crap you not, this guy gives me a withering look and says, "Is there any chance you're actually going to buy a car today?" Well, there was until you said that, dick weasel. But now, no way you're getting commission off me. Proceeded to test drive the second car, nope the F out of there, and buy my Mazda from a different dealership in the town where my parents live. Story 36. I knew the exact deal I wanted for a new Altima. A dealership in Brooklyn listed it for $50 a month, but if you read the fine print, it was really about $230. Knowing all the math involved, I walked into a local dealership in New Jersey and said if they could beat the deal, I would buy it from them right now. I even wrote out the math on the newspaper I brought with me. The young, probably inexperienced salesman said he needed to talk to his manager. A few minutes later, he came back with the newspaper. On the newspaper was drawn a picture of a hangman, like in the game, and he said he couldn't do the deal. I looked at the drawing incredulously, looked at him and asked, "Seriously?" I then asked, "You won't even match it?" He said he wouldn't, so I walked out. A week later, he called and asked if I was still interested. I said I wasn't because I already bought a car. He asked what kind, and I said a Maxima, which was an upgrade from the Altima. I could practically hear his whole body slump. I didn't need to tell him it was a used Maxima. Story 37. My mom needed a new car. I was about 8 months pregnant and was desperate to get out of the house, so I went with her. We went to a local Nissan dealership, and a salesman was at our car door before we shut off the engine. I looked at Mom and said super quietly, "This dude looks like every Russian mafia stereotype I've ever seen. Bet you $1 his name is Vlad." It was. And so I had to walk away to stifle my laughter. We explained we were looking at used and would come find him if we found one we liked. He kept aggressively saying he won't deal with used. Go look at new. He literally got between us and the used lot and herded us to the new cars. Mom shrugged and we looked. This guy lights up a cigarette right beside me. I'm super short, and now my belly is as round as I am tall. Very obviously pregnant. I walk away. He continues getting in mine and my mom's face with the lit cigarette until I finally snap. "A-hole, either back off or put out the effing cigarette. Seriously, we're just looking. You aren't making a sale today. Just go away." He glared and stormed off, but kept following us a row away. He had spoken to another greaseball in a pleather jacket who then came over and started talking about the new cars. Mom said we only wanted used. He got mad, but kept following us. Then he lit a cigarette. Mother effer. I told Mom, I can't be around all the smoke and I need to pee anyway. You ready to go get lunch? We walked to her car. By the time we got there, the manager was standing in front of the driver door, not letting Mom get in the car. "Why won't you buy a car? These guys are going to give you a great deal." My mom is easily intimidated, so I got back out and walked to her side. "Give me the keys and get in the car, Mom." She did. I told the manager to move. He refused. "Why won't you buy a car?" "Because we had no plans to buy today. We were just looking." She isn't sure if she even wants a car, but now we know for damn sure she doesn't want a Nissan. Get off the door. He smirked and let me in, but I heard him tell Vlad, "We're getting this sale." They effing stood behind the car so I couldn't back out. The manager leaves and comes back with paperwork for us to look over and gestures for me to roll down the window. I told him he had 30 seconds to get away from the car before I started driving. I told Mom to call the cops. I actually had to bump into Vlad before he moved. We called corporate over it. They offered us a great deal. Mom bought a Ford. I can't fathom what part of the event they thought would sell a car. The invasion of personal space, the stalking, or the attempted hostage situation. Story 38. I was negotiating pretty hard on the price of my first brand new car, back in about 2001. The salesman and I had reached a tentative agreement that I was happy with, and he went into the office to run it by a sales manager. The sales manager came in and said they couldn't make that deal, and tried to talk me up another $500. Finally, he said, "Come on, it's only another $500. I immediately shot back with, "Only $500? $500 is a lot of money for me." I'm happy to hear you're worried about $500 though, because the only way I'm buying this car is if we take another $500 off the price I already negotiated. He hemmed and hawed for a few minutes, saying things like, "Oh, come on now, don't be like that." But eventually, he went back into the office and talked to the initial salesman again. I could hear them yelling and saw a bunch of hand waving and finger pointing. Finally, my initial salesman came back out and offered me the deal we agreed on earlier. I told him no, and he said he couldn't go any lower. I went home. They called me back the next day, offering the price I asked for, including the $500 discount. So in the end, they got the sale, but they weren't happy about it. Story 39. I went to the Honda dealership, 0.5 miles away from the house. I wanted a 2015 Honda Civic Si. I hadn't done a ton of research, and this was more of an impulse buy. The cigarette-reeking, thick accent-having salesman hemmed and hawed at allowing me to test drive it. Strike one. I had an extended cab splash-side 6-cylinder standard transmission Ford Ranger Edge 2004 with 108,000 miles on the trade-in. Kelley Blue Book value was around $4,500 to $5,200. They offered me $2,700. I declined the offer and went to leave, when I was strong-armed by the large, burly sales manager. He insulted my preparedness to engage in the transaction and even asserted that he was, quote, doing me a solid with the terms and conditions. I walked the F out. In all honesty, he was right. I was not prepared. I stayed up all night researching. This happened on a Friday afternoon, and went to a dealership about 40 miles away the next morning and landed a deal for 1, what I really wanted, which was a fully loaded coupe, not a 4-door, and 2, with a trade-in price of $4,900, which suited my budget tremendously. Were it not for that a-hole sales manager, I likely would have settled for a higher price, less of a trade-in, and a 4-door sedan instead of the fully loaded coupe I still love to death. Though I would definitely trade my beautiful girl in for a Civic Type R if I could afford it. Story 40. Not a sales guy, but a recruiter. Had just started looking for a new job after taking some time off. As part of the process, I had updated my LinkedIn and started posting my resume on some sites. A day later, a recruiter called me, only introduced himself as Mike like he was an old friend. He doesn't really say what he's calling about, and when I ask Mike who, he answers, Mike Jones, you know me. After about a minute of me trying to figure out who the hell this dude is, he says, I last talked to you a few weeks ago about switching jobs. This is already a bit fishy, since I'd made it a point of not searching for jobs up until this point, but I didn't rule out speaking to him, so I let him continue. He then goes on to ask if I was still working at Company XX, which was a company that I hadn't worked for in over 10 years. At that point, all my alarms go off, and I tell him there's no way he talked to me at all before, and that there's no way I'd work with someone who's lying to me so obviously. He argued with me for a bit until I hung up on him. He may have been a recruiter, and by lying, he talked himself out of working with me. Or maybe, just maybe, he was the world's worst hacker. The job he was referring to was when I was a security engineer for a defense contractor. I haven't done that kind of work in 10 years at that point. Story 41. I was shopping for a used F-150. Narrowed it down to 3 trucks I was considering. 2 were from a dealership and the other from a private owner. Went to look at the private owner one first. It was a nice truck, but had a couple issues that I wasn't willing to deal with. Cam phaser issue being the top one. He was willing to come down on the price, but I politely declined. Went to the first dealership. Their truck was the nicer of the 3. King Ranch with all the options. Low miles and ran solid. We ran some numbers and they were in my price range. I was truly interested in the truck, but told him that I had one other that I wanted to look at and I would make my decision after that. First, he started in with the guilt trip. Come on, man. I've done all this work for you. We've met all your demands. I didn't demand anything. My manager's gonna have my ass if you don't buy today, etc. I told him that I really liked the truck, but I wanted to go look at this other one. He then started getting hostile with me. Same guilt trip as before, but now he was slamming his fist down on the desk and shoved the paperwork in front of me and said, I need you to sign this and commit to this vehicle. By this time, I was over this guy's attitude. I said, I'm not signing anything. I'm gonna go look at this other truck. He then slid his chair around the side of his desk, stood up and said, I can't let you leave without signing this. I can't let you leave without signing this? I effing saw red. I stood up, kicked the chair backwards from under me, and said, I'm leaving, and if you don't get the F out of my way, me and you are going to fight. He saw that I wasn't bluffing and stepped to the side. I went to the next dealership. The truck was in great shape, the person was nice, we agreed on the price, and I bought it that day and still own it. Story 42. Buying a car for me, female, and I'm shopping with my husband. The slick salesman keeps talking to my husband like I'm not there. I had a diesel Jetta before, so I had just accepted a complete payout for my car, plus a few thousand for the VW diesel scandal. This means that I'm paying cash for this car that I'm buying, which to me means that for the first time in my life, I'm feeling in control of this car sale. I realize from their perspective, they make more off of you when you take out a loan, but still, the car was meant to be my daily driver. But again, the guy can't seem to talk to me at all. The guy tries to convince my husband that we need to buy a car with a lower package, basically because he wants to make the sale today and the package I wanted on the car would have to be shipped from another location. At one point, I got so mad at him, I turned to him and said, "I'm pretty sure I walked in here with enough money to buy this car, and you're telling me I can't have the options I want? Your need to make a sale today is not my problem. And if you don't get someone else to handle my business, your manager is going to want to know why the dealership missed out on my cash sale." He looked at me like I was a huge female dog, but sure enough, he got another guy to come help me. Story 43. I was 18 and ready to buy my first car. My dad came with me because I was traveling to another town and meeting a private seller to buy a vehicle I picked out. He decides we should make a couple pit stops and check out some dealerships just in case things with the private seller didn't work out. We stopped at a very popular dealership because they were advertising super low prices on starter cars. We go and test drive one that kinda meets my wants and needs. It was a small SUV, 4-wheel drive, blah blah blah, but I wasn't sold on it. I was 100% paying for this vehicle by myself. That was one of the first things my father told the salesman. The salesman's directed 0 questions at me. He told my dad about prior issues the car had and tried to haggle with him on price, and just spent the good part of an hour trying to sell the car to my father. Never said a word to me, just gave me that smile that men like to give girls when they think they don't really know what's going on. I was over it. My dad went to warm his car back up so we could leave and to try to get the man to talk to me. Dude just asked how I liked my soon-to-be car and how he was going to give me a deal and send me off the lot with a full tank of gas. I thanked him for his time and walked out. He did get my phone number somewhere in that whole ordeal and spent the rest of the day leaving me voicemails about coming back to get the car. I ignored them while driving home in my brand new, to me, Pathfinder that has been absolutely great to me since I got it. Story 44. I was in the market for a truck. After years of driving sedans, I was ready to make the switch to something that was better suited to my lifestyle. Went online and did a lot of research at various dealerships in the area, and settled on a Chevy Silverado with low mileage and all the bells and whistles. I knew what I wanted to pay and had calculated out what my payments, with interest, would be after my trade-in. While talking to the salesperson, he gathered some information about me, including my place of employment, which is a rather large financial company. After some back and forth, he told me that my payment amount that I wanted was unrealistic, and that there was no way to do it for that much a month. I showed him my math and how it broke down, reminding him that this is what I did for a living. He decided that was an appropriate time to tell me, "Sir, I don't think you understand how numbers work." I was dumbfounded, especially after telling him that's what I did for a living. I didn't even take the time to tell him I was leaving, just got up and left. Followed up with me about a week later asking if I was still interested, and I informed him that I had already bought a Dodge Ram from another dealership that was much friendlier and that I had already told as many people as I could to not go to his dealership. He promptly hung up. Story 45. Wife was buying a new car and I was with her. We keep totally separate financial lives, and she did the research and scheduled an appointment in her name to test drive a car. Get to the appointment. We're seated, and when we're greeted by a guy, he walks right up to me and says, "You must be the husband," and starts to ask me what I'm looking for. Guy totally ignores my wife and kinda cuts in between us. I'm like, my wife is the one that wants to test drive a car. Guy looks a touch puzzled, turns and leans down obnoxiously to her level and says, "Well, what kind of car are you looking for, honey?" Emphasis on drawing out his southern dialect on the work honey. My wife, being a salty as F Navy veteran, turned into a beast. She immediately shoved her finger in the jerk's chest and walks him backward. "Honey? Honey? I have a name right there on the paperwork, and it sure as F isn't Honey, you sexist hillbilly mother effer," right in the middle of the dealership. You could have heard a pin drop for about 5 seconds before the manager comes sprinting out of his office and then profusely apologized. Needless to say, we didn't buy a car that day. Story 46. Was ready to buy a computer for my college and went with my parents to this big store, well known in my country. Looking around, I was checking everything and comparing prices. while my parents were around too, suggesting stuff, but none know about computers at all. For them, the bigger numbers the better, yet even if they were struggling with money, they wanted the best for me. No thanks. A good deal is a good deal, and it doesn't have to be pricey for it. The salesman saw my father, started talking with him about these new laptops, how this is better than that, and how whatever. Dad had no idea, but he believes everything you tell him. Tell him 4 words that sound hard to comprehend about computers, a few bullcrap numbers, and he's sold. Well, salesman wasn't stupid, saw the stars in my innocent father's eyes, and proceeded to go for a €1,300 laptop. Dad comes, mentally prepared to agree to pay for this amazing laptop, even if it passed the limit of money my mom and I put. No effing way we're buying that. I had my eyes on a more cheaper one, around €750, and it was more expensive than I initially wanted. Told him no. Mom nodded. Too expensive. Yeah, I can't say it was bad. For €1,300, you can get an amazing laptop, but I just need to write stuff on it and maybe play a decent game. My dearest father turned into the salesman, though, while the actual salesman came and watched as my dad tried to sell me the laptop in broken Spanish, since, of course, he wanted to impress the salesman with how much he learned. Bless this man in his heart, but no. Salesman interjects, frowning at me as I said I don't want it, and I don't need one with those specs. Proceeded to ask me what do I even know about computers. Say what? I major in studying them, you cucko. Yet I didn't say anything. Mom was putting up a female dog face towards the dude as we both stared at him. Vibes felt awkward. Dad still had stars in his eyes. He proceeded to try to talk my dad into it again, ignoring us. You're right, what do I know? Let's go to insert another company name here, well known for electronics. My dad is still convinced that the salesman was the Jesus of computers, and I missed a big deal. What I missed is making my parents pay 450 more euros than what I got in the other company. What do I even know, though? So what seems to be a common theme here is, unfortunately, a whole lot of misogyny and a whole lot of looking down on kids, teenagers, and questioning or second-guessing their knowledge about certain situations. And that is really unfortunate. The respect and reverence that's just automatically given to a man is staggering when you consider the complete opposite of how women and children are treated in the exact same scenario. That just sucks. Story 47. My husband and I got our water quality tested through Home Depot for free, and they called and offered us a $20 gift card if they could send someone to our home to do an in-depth, in-home water quality test, aka water filter/softener sales pitch, that they swore wouldn't last more than 20 minutes. This older gentleman showed up at our home and held my husband and I hostage at our sink for 3 hours. But he said 2 things that really killed it for him. He was comparing our tap water to his filtered water with some sort of dye and said, "That looks like 1,000 illegal aliens bathed in it." I should have kicked him out of my home right then. My husband and I are both white, so I guess he just assumed we would be of the same mindset, but we're also decent human beings. When doing a hand washing demo, he told me to wash my hands like I was a scrub nurse preparing for brain surgery. I didn't really think anything of it until it was my husband's turn, and he said, "She was the scrub nurse, you'll be the brain surgeon." He did not make the sale. Sales tip. Don't assume that every white person you try to sell will appreciate your racist comments and antiquated gender norms. His final mistake? He gave us a business card with a link on it and asked us to leave a review of his sales pitch. And we sure did. Story 48. Not a current sale, but a distant future sale. I went to university in central London, UK, where property prices are outrageous. A couple of friends and I were looking for a flat to rent and basically walked from our university out towards cheaper areas, calling into every estate agent we passed along the way to find the closest one with a flat we could anything like afford. On our way out, we passed a branch of Foxtons. For those who don't live in the UK, Foxtons are a massive London-based estate agent who all drive minis and whose offices look like wine bars. The company's shady AF. They were thoroughly panned years ago in an undercover BBC documentary on their business practices. Anyhow, when we told the rentals guy how much we could afford to spend, he laughed us out of the office. As in, he literally stood up and laughed directly in our faces before he called his colleagues over to tell them how little the jokers at his desk expected to spend. We walked out in shame as the office sniggered behind us. We just kind of stumbled, dazed, directly into the next place. And when we got inside, it became immediately apparent it was not what we were looking for. It basically sold country houses and castles to the super rich. As we backed out, the 2 guys working there called us over and asked what we were looking to spend. They agreed agreed that nothing they had would be in our price band, but were really nice about it. Even suggested some other agents that might be more what we were looking for, shook our hands and wished us all the best. During the discussion, they asked where we were studying, a prestigious university that turns out lots of high earners, and told us that were we in the market for property later on in life, they hoped we would drop in and see them again. We both swore that day I would never step into a branch of Foxton's again. I'd love to say that I recently went back and bought a castle from the second agents, but of course I haven't. Regardless, my friend and I graduated and remained in London for many years renting flats, from other agents, as professionals. I made a point of never considering anything marketed through Foxton's. He's a successful consultant surgeon, and I went into law. Both of us became the sort of client Foxton's would now love to have, but lost forever because one of their agents was such a knob. Story 49. Went to test drive a used car. Got there, right away red flags because the dealer doesn't have a price listed. It was $10,000 on their website, but he spent literally 15 minutes trying to find a price. It looks slightly worse for wear shape, and as my mom and I look around it, he lets slip, "We just got this in, so we haven't had a chance to look it over and see what we need to do with it. I'm not buying this car." We get in. The odometer reads exactly $10,000 more than it was listed online. Okay, maybe a transposition error. I mention it, and the guy says, "I guess I'll have to cut you a crazy deal then." Drive it. The brakes are crunching the entire loop. We get back, and I have no intention of buying. He again mentions a crazy deal, which I'm willing to at least hear out. He offers me $9,500. I tell him I work at a local credit union, and I know we have prearranged deals for cars, and I want that price. I have to say it 3 times before he goes to ask his manager. He comes back with $8,800. If it weren't a crappy car, it would be a good price. I tell him I'll think about it and call him. He asked me what price it would take for me to sign right then, and I said $7,500. He looks like I slapped him and indicates there's no way his boss will sign off on that. I told him I didn't say his boss would sign off on it. I said I'd buy it without thinking about it at that price. He goes and talks to his boss and comes back with $8,600 and asks what I think about that. I smiled and told him, which I think he should have been able to guess, I'd have to think about it. Drove to another dealership. They offered me a better car for $7,700. I asked if they could do $7,500, and I drove off with the car. Story 50. This actually happened just 2 days ago. I went to look at a used car at a Chevy dealership. My husband wanted to look at a Subaru at a dealership down the road. We leave them to appraise our trade, and they let us go on the test drive. I dropped him off at the Subaru down the street. We obviously want the best price for the trade, so the plan, which we had told them, was to take the trade and let Subaru look at it before we made a decision. They come back to me with the numbers and completely lowball me on the trade, like $2,000 less than what we had already been offered elsewhere, which I had told them. I can't say no to that and need to go. Call me if they can work a better deal. The sales manager comes in and asks me why. I was trying to calmly explain to him that I couldn't take a $5,000 loss on the deal and was going to try and do better elsewhere. Even though I already had a better trade offer, he told me that they were just playing with the numbers. I tried patiently to explain that if I could take less of a loss, that it would be better and that I had to try and get the best deal I could. He kept trying to explain to me why it was better to just take his deal. Like I said, if they offer me X, then I'll only be taking a $4,000 loss. To which he replied, "Why? It's only $1,000. What's $1,000? After a couple rounds of this, I just got up and left. He actually yelled after me as I walked out, "What's holding you back? Come on, what's holding you back?" It was easily the worst car sales experience of my life. Why do people think this will work? Story 51. Last summer, I went to a gun store, intent on picking up a new SIG P320. This wasn't one of those, I'm going to go fondle new stuff and walk out. I had been texting a friend about how if they had the model I wanted, and I didn't mind how the action and trigger felt, I was going to get it that day. I got there, asked a sales droid to see one. I forget if it was a P320 carry or compact. He took it out, cleared it, and handed it to me. I cleared it, pulled the trigger, racked the slide to try the trigger reset. Tried it again, and when I racked, the slide got stuck back. Weird. There's no magazine in there. Racked it again. The sales droid says, "You aren't supposed to rack it that hard. You're only supposed to do it half an inch or so to reset the trigger." I told him, I've been racking slides for a decade and a half on Glocks, SIGs, HKs, Springfields. That's how they work. The slide goes back, the spring throws it forward. That's what happens when a round is fired, and that's what happens when you clear a malfunction. That's how you're supposed to rack a slide. He continues on, saying that I broke it by racking the slide so hard, and I'd have to pay for an hour of their gunsmith's time to check it. when he gets back from vacation next week, and pay for any damage. He asked for contact info and for a copy of my ID. F that. It's a gun, not fine china. I'll give you my name and my phone number. That's it. How do I know that's your real info? You can see my ID, but you're not making a copy, and I'm not paying for anything. We go through that rigmarole, and then he tells me, as if he didn't totally piss me off and that he might still make a sale, honestly, if you want a striker-fired gun, go with Glock. Maybe for a range toy, but these things have too many points of failure. I've got them over here. I never say this, because I'm not a teenage girl, but at this point, I can't even. I left, talked with my friend in the lot to calm down, and went back in to complain to a manager. I told her that I'm not Superman. I can't operate a pistol slide so hard I break it. She was understanding, but of course didn't make any solid promises, but was confident I was fine. Said they occasionally got weapons from resellers that were slightly out of spec or whatever. She said she'd look into it, but I probably didn't have anything to worry about. Sales schmuck calls an hour later, presumably after manager reamed him out. Says, I took another look at it. Part of the frame was sticking up ever so slightly and catching, so you're good. I just didn't want it weighing on you for a week, so I wanted to follow up. Okay, thanks. Okay, have a good evening. No apology or anything. All I wanted to hear was him say, I'm sorry for that ridiculous accusation, and I'd consider going back to the store/range. But nope, so F him. In retrospect, at the end of the phone conversation, I should have asked to speak to the manager to tell her how he continued to be disrespectful and unapologetic. Oh well. Story 52. Not me specifically, but my friend, and it was to do with me. Went with my friend to look at a couple of cars. He brings me along because I've worked on cars and raced stock cars since I was a teen, so I knew a thing or two about engines and crash damage/repairs and could pick out dodgy bits. But the dodgy bits weren't the least of it. So we arrive in a garage/scrapyard where they have a row of used cars to sale out front. There's two he wants to go look at, so we go on in. While being shown the first one, I look across the yard and see a familiar face. My mate decides he wants the bottle green VW Bora, and on the way to the office, to finish up the deal, I ask the salesman if that familiar face is his boss. He says yes. Now, I used to work for him in a different garage as a breaker in the yard. So we get to the office and I put a stop to everything and tell the salesman I wanted to speak to the boss before my mate buys anything. He doesn't want to, but I tell him it's fine. I used to work for him and I just wanted to chat with him over the car before we sign anything. This is when my mate starts to realize what's happening. So the guy goes and gets his boss and he comes in all smiles and welcomes. How have you been? Etc. I'm wonderful, thanks, but you're gonna love this. I turn to my friend and say, this is the guy who had me sandblasting and respraying brake calipers I'd pulled out of broken wrecks in the yard so he could put them in boxes and fit them to cars as new parts I told you about. The salesman had to bite his lip at hearing this, but you could tell he knew what I was on about. Yet, man's jaw dropped. He started to defend himself and get angry, asking how dare I spread lies and try to damage his business. He shut up when I said, I have no problem calling the guards, police, to come down here and have a look at your stock right now. After the way you ripped me off on wages, I should have sent him to the last place when I quit. I watched you put those parts into cars with baby seats in them. All I got after that was, leave. We left and I didn't call the cops on him, but apparently a month or two later, a guard's wife got her brakes done by your man and he got rumbled when they failed, and the guard's wife presented the repair receipts to the insurance company, who very quickly would have realized those new parts were refurbished at best. Story 53. We had a salesman from the Hillary's Blinds round to our house. Hillary's being a company in the UK that sells blinds. Guess there's a clue in the name, and shutters. I say we, but my wife was out, which was a shame as she stands for far less crap from salesmen. He was a very old school type salesman, going through this routine about how he didn't really need the job anymore, but he stayed on out of loyalty to help train up the youngsters. How he'd been there so long he could bend a few rules, and so he'd make sure we got a good deal. All this was very tiring, but I'm that horrible mix of being very polite on the outside, yet seething internally. Get on with it and just give us a price, I said internally, while all he heard was my polite responses to his waffle. Anyway, after an hour or so, we got somewhere close to prices. They had maybe 5 different types of shutter, different qualities of MDF as far as I could tell, with offers on some and not others. I think it was the annual make it up as you go along sale. I settled on the shutters I'm pretty sure he steered me into selecting, the second cheapest. They looked like wood, had the price of wood, but were made from something far cheaper. He had an app which showed how our windows might look with shutters on. It was reassuring to see that the windows would indeed look similar in how I imagined them looking. All along, all I had wanted was a price. Hillary's actually had decent reviews. We knew we wanted shutters. As long as the price was reasonable, we could proceed. He gets out a scrap of paper, maybe half a torn A4 sheet, and chats as he puts some numbers down. Some outlandish figure, but with the 50% off and then the extra 20%, it comes in at, here we are. I looked at the figure, and I'm sure he picks up on my reaction. It isn't one of horror, just an, okay, seems fair enough. He's 30 seconds away from having my handshake. But he then stalls and says he's made a mistake. He's applied an extra 20% discount, which he shouldn't have. That deal expired. The price will have to go up a bit, but he can take 10% off. He shouldn't. His boss will be mad, but he promised us a good price, and so he'll meet us in the middle. At that moment, the deal is dead, and I want him out of the house. There feels like a 1% chance it's a genuine mistake. 99% likelihood he's picked up on the fact that I'm going to sign, and so is looking for that little bit more margin. The initial price was probably too high, but it felt okay. This new higher price would have also felt fine if it had been what he just came to, but this fleecing, taking the piss, essentially saying I can suck a bit more out of you, instantly killed his sale. He left shortly afterwards, then called 3 times in the days to come, but only ever hit my voicemail. Since then, we found a local company on a recommendation who did a great job. Story 54. Reading about all these instances reminds me of a visit I made to the mall once to buy a copy of Wind Waker when it first came out. I walked into GameStop knowing precisely what I wanted, and picked out a brand new copy of the game off the shelf, and then milled around a little bit, because there's usually something interesting to look through, and I had some time. Once I'm done browsing, I go up to the desk to buy my game, and when I hand the salesman the game case, he starts badgering me to buy a used copy instead, since they make most of their money on used games. I didn't want a pre-owned copy, and politely declined. So he says, okay, kinda looking put off. He digs around behind the desk and brings out a used copy, opening the case and holding the disc up in my face. See? Not even any scratches on it. I'd mostly tuned out by this point, and was like, yeah, looks fine, I guess. No intention of changing my mind, on my part, just an automatic reply to move the transaction forward, and I was honestly barely paying attention to this guy's pitch. He looks at me, his face brightens, and he says, "You'll take it then?" I'm confused, and just say to him, "I want the new copy," in what was probably an annoyed, firm tone. He proceeds to pout and shrugs, throwing his hands up and snapping, "I'm just trying to save you money on what's basically just as good." By this point, some family members of mine are looking on from outside, and I must have given my dad an incredulous look because he walks in to stand next to me while I tell this salesman, "I appreciate that, but I really just want a brand new copy. It's just kind of a thing for me." The guy seemed like he wanted to argue further, but not only was his manager now standing a few feet away, my dad cut him off by saying, "Just sell him the copy. He's made his choice. Why is that so hard for you to understand?" He finally clammed up, and I ended up finishing the transaction with the guy's manager instead, while the salesman went into the back room, where I heard some angry muttering as I left. To be fair, the manager had a great poker face. Story 55. The salesman tried to play me because he thought I would be easy to fool since I was a fresh graduate buying my first car. I had negotiated online and did my research on the price. I came in with a quoted price that I wanted and knew that I could also apply a student discount and low student financing rate to that quote. I called the dealership to make an appointment an hour before going in, so they cannot prepare bull crap and to test drive a car and ready to sign papers. I'm greeted by a salesman. I test drive the car and the salesman fell asleep while in it. Had to wake him up so I can get directions back to the dealership. I asked him if I'd be able to use my discount and special rate. He said yes. We get back to the dealership and we start paperwork. He's pushing me really hard to sign blindly, even though I wanted to read what was being read. He collects my paperwork required for the discount and special rate. Then, the financing guy comes out with bullcrap and says I cannot use my discount and special rate at the same time, and suggested I should go with the special rate. I knew immediately that after collecting my paperwork, he was trying to play me to cash in my discount. Just to check, I called another dealership to verify that I could do both. Needless to say, I left pissed off and made a deal with the other dealership who honored the deal. Story 56. Test drove a Honda Civic at a dealership in South Carolina and decided to buy it after I left. I called them to let them know I was going to buy the car, but I needed to wait until later in the week because I was busy with work and couldn't take the time to get to the dealership until X day. They said, okay, that's fine. Well, the very next day, I get a call from them trying to get me to come in to sign papers. They even offered to send a driver out to come get me. That's kind of nice, except I told them I couldn't make it because I legitimately couldn't make it. They said that it was okay and they'd see me on the originally discussed day. Well, I show up with my down payment, check in hand on X day, after spending $40 in taxi fare, only to find out they sold it already. They then tried to get me to buy a vehicle I didn't want. I understand that a buyer in person is better than a buyer in the distance, but man, at least call me so I don't waste my time and money. I walked across the street and bought from the dealership there instead. Still got F by folks unwilling to haggle price, but at least it wasn't the original dealer. Story 57. I was the salesman. My first days. The customer tells me what another salesman told her. He told her lots of bullcrap, and if I could offer the same thing, which was totally nonsensical, and actually he lied to her. So I told her how he lied and why his offer made no sense at all. Turns out that if you tell someone they've been lied to, they get mad at you and don't trust you. On another occasion, I met with a wealthy woman who owned 2 businesses. She lived in a rich part of the city and was expensively dressed with a business look, with high heels and makeup, and looked kinda powerful. So after some talks and her showing me her incredible house, we made a comparison. For simplicity, let's say the competition offers $18 with a 30% discount 12 months, and we offer $11 with 4% forever. It was very late and coworkers were already waiting for me to go home in the car. I was tired, and it shocked me that such a businesswoman couldn't see how a 4% was better than the 30%. I was like, really? So I showed her the math, and she was still obsessed with the 30%. It was a big sale, and we have a much better offer, and I lost so much time with her that I got sad and nervous. I said, even your son can do this math. And she got kind of offended, and it was late, so I had to leave. Story 58. Was looking to get a RAV4, and the price was negotiated. I tell the salesman I'm eligible for the graduate rebate/discount. He goes and says the price negotiated is too low and can't be applied. No stipulation in the small print that says a low price negates the rebate. Became nasty quickly and walked out. Called Toyota Corporate because my deposit wouldn't be returned and to file a complaint against the dealership. Got a personal call from the manager who wasn't that nice either. Got my money back in 48 hours. This was Bay Ridge, Toyota in Brooklyn. Also, another time went into a Honda dealer in New Jersey and the salesman asked what other cars we were looking at, and I said Subaru. The rest of the test drive was all about Subarus and how great they are. This was DCH Academy Honda in Old Bridge. A third time was at a Honda dealer trying to trade in my Honda for another Honda, and there was a big difference in value. I knew my price was right. The dealership refuses to come up in value and says the car will wind up at some used dealer on Route 1 through 9 in New Jersey because no one wants a base model. F you, by the way. I walk out with my wife, and while I'm eating lunch, I get a text from the salesman with the price I wanted. I ignored his text at first, but then decided to answer. My reply was too little too late and that he lost the sale. This was also DCH Academy Honda in Old Bridge. Story 59. I grew up a car person. My parents joined a classic car club when I was 12, and I learned at a very young age to work on cars. At 17, I bought myself a classic Mustang. I was the president of the car club for a number of years in my early 20s. A few months before my 24th birthday, I was still driving my partially restored Mustang as my everyday car. My now ex-husband and I had either just graduated college or were going to in a matter of weeks, and both had full-time employment and a healthy down payment and good credit. We had purchased a vehicle for him the year prior. I had done extensive research on used vehicles, and we had a very good idea of what we wanted. Reliability, safety rating, front wheel or all-wheel drive, manual, 4 doors, and upgrades. So the sales guy started first by giving me a limp, floppy handshake, and then basically addressed everything to my ex-husband, who was like, "Don't look at me, dude, it's her car." Sales guy took the hint, but didn't really grasp what my ex meant. He started talking to me, but when I'd say what we were looking for, he'd interrupt with some casual dismissive remark, or paraphrase what I said completely incorrectly. I think I told him some specific models we're interested in 5 times, ones we had seen on their website stock list. The guy is all, yeah, but have you seen our new Malibus? And I kept saying, no, we know what we want. And seriously, this guy said, in a baby talk voice, "Oh, you're sure you don't want a Malibu? They're cute, little Malibu boo," and some other crap. We stopped right there. My ex asked the guy point blank, "Do you have this car, or this car?" The dude tried to deflect again to these crappy stock Malibus, and that was it. We said no thank you and turned and left. Story 60. I went to a motorcycle dealership. I wanted a new Honda VFR 800, sports bike, but not quite as uncomfortable as most of them. They had the bike I wanted sitting on the showroom as a 2-year-old, but still new leftover bike, marked down, and I was ready to pay what they were asking. Salesman spent 15 minutes telling me everything bad about the bike and why I won't like it. I currently had a GSX R600, another sport bike, and he basically told me that the bike I had was better than the one I wanted to buy. After he had me good and talked out of the new 800, he pointed me at the 1000. I told him that I've ridden a few 1000cc bikes, don't like them and don't want one. Said I'll keep what I have and walked out. Went to look at a Chevy Cruze. The model/trim I wanted was listed at $17,000 on AutoTrader. Salesman was pointing me at other stuff. I said, no, this is not what I want. He told me that I should buy the one on his lot because the one I wanted would be at least $25,000 if not more. I said, oh, I don't want one then, and left. Bought a new Ford Focus a couple days later for $13,500. Story 61. My wife answered the door and got me to talk to the salesman because she doesn't like talking to salespeople. He was selling an upgraded home security service, and I figured this would be an easy sell for him because I was looking for an upgrade. So if it had been at all reasonable, I would have bought it. He opens up with his normal spiel and starts asking me what services we have. Fair enough. He needs to know what I have so he can offer me something better. Do you have your security system hooked up to your fire alarms? Well, no, I don't. He tisks. That's no good. Aren't you worried about your house? We have insurance and working smoke alarms. I'm not that worried about it, but I'm ready to consider an upgrade. Tell me about your plans. What are you offering? This chuckle F doesn't get the hint. Instead of telling me about his plans and letting me look at them, he wants to keep going down the guilt you into buying a better product route. He insinuates that I don't care about my cap because I don't already have the fire alarms linked to the security system. I give him the look, the one that says, that was strike one. Cut it out. Then he hits me with this. Do you have window sensors? No, we don't. Wow, do you just not care about your wife's safety? Anyone could come in and you wouldn't know it. Me, with a gun currently in a small of back holster as I'm talking with him. I was ready to buy just about whatever you were offering, but now I think you need to get off my porch. What? Do you get off my porch right now? That's the only time I've been so blunt with a door-to-door salesman. I usually say something about not wasting their time and not being interested, but this guy deserved it. I still get steamed when I consider the fact that a-hole is probably still out there guilting people into buying his product. If this guy had literally just shut up and handed me his tablet so I could scroll through options and ask him questions, he'd have made a sale. Story 62. I was at Fry's with a friend. He wants to eventually build a computer and we were hanging out, and I was going to show him parts and prices and stuff and explain how building a computer works and stuff. Occasional sales guy comes. I say just looking. Then we mosey on through the laptop section. I just wanted a quick look. I'd gotten a laptop as a gift randomly for Christmas several months before, and I saw they had it and I wanted to look at it. This guy comes over, suit and tie, dressed more better than the regular employees. I guess he had a higher position. Man, this was so long ago, hard to remember the details, but he just got us stuck in conversation. Nothing was working on him. It got awkward. We got weak and ended up stuck listening to him and looking at laptops. He wasn't even trying to sell us anything too hard. He ended up telling us about his sponsorship he had in the past for playing pro PC Call of Duty, how he was over 200 gigabytes of RAM because he can, how his group of friends has a rich friend that rents out big presentation rooms in hotels and whatnot to just have a gaming night, and how he was depressed at one point wanting to self-unalive. Oh, and he was bragging about all the Fallout NV mods he has. Really hard to know what to say and get out of it. At the time, at least. He was just one of those types of dudes that's just an expert at sucking you into conversation, especially if you're too polite to be a tad rude to get out of it. One of his coworkers that works under him, he came over. Then the first guy acts all salesman-like and tells the underling to tell us the specs of a certain laptop that I was kind of looking at. This was just a whack experience, and we were there to just browse over computer parts. I know what you're thinking because I'm thinking the same thing. WTF, isn't that hard to brush him off and keep looking around the store? But I remember at the time, this guy was just an expert at this weird get sucked in socially kind of thing. He kind of followed us around. He was just trying to bro it up or something, and he just kept the conversation going. Damn, I'm not one to be in that situation, at least not now anymore, but this guy was like a weird stranger social wizard. Eventually, I hardballed him, saying we're going to go look at power supplies for PCs. He said he'd come with, but then revealed he was joking. But man, he knew what he was doing. Weirdest salesman situation ever. He was bored and wanted to chat. Maybe make friends? My friend is the doesn't talk kind of guy, so I had to do all the work. And I'm a kind, polite kind of guy. I know how to get out of situations, but this salesman beat me. He won. We were sucked into his game for at least 30 minutes, maybe more. Typing this out, I feel embarrassed, but thinking back at how it felt and the situation back then, he feels unreal and not normal. TLDR, I walked into the laptop/notebook section of Fry's just to look at prices. Was at Fry's to show my friend PC parts and hang out. Ended up getting stuck in an unwanted conversation with a higher-up employee for at least over 30 minutes. He would kind of talk about sales stuff, but would go back into bro talk, then dropping the "I was wanting to self-unalive at one point" bomb during his talking about his life spiel. It got more awkward and more hard to get out of that situation. He knew I wasn't going to buy anything that day, so he wasn't going hard on sales talk, and was just doing the talk about games and bro stuff and whatever like we're friends. Story 63. Used car salesman proudly handed me the logbooks and owner's manual for the car. Gray import. They were all for a totally different model, all in Japanese, and the body codes were similar but not the same. M35 versus V35. Noped out of there pretty quick. Edit. Oh, and another one. Again, used car. At a reputable dealer in town. Looked at a particular car I was eyeing off. I wanted the color they had. The KMs were okay. It was really clean and tidy, but I was looking at a personal import at the time, and the cost worked out the same in the end. Once we ran finance, which was quite high, I said we're not signing anything tonight as we're yet to hear back from the importer about a suitable M35. Finance guy. What's that? Me. A large Nissan wagon, but gray import. FG. Oh, they're no good. Me. Why? FG. Too expensive, and you don't know what you're getting. Me. Actually, I've got a basic quote, and it's not any different to your car here, price-wise. And the Ks are better, and the importer provides a full report and history check prior to purchase, and the price includes compliance. FG. But they're too expensive to service. You have to get everything from Japan. Me. No, they run the same engine as the local 350Z, and I can go to generic parts store to get filters cheaper, or OEM off the shelf down the road. FG. If something goes wrong, no one looks at them. Me, quite pissed at his downplaying by this point. There's a great aftermarket scene of these. You have to know the right places to look. By this point, I'd made up my mind we were not getting the car here. The price was a touch high for the age/KM crossover from my research, and the finance deal was poor. I basically told him then and there we're not getting the car tonight. Thanks for your time. They called me 3 weeks later saying it had sold. I gleefully told them I'd driven 4 hours to pick up another car, exact same make and model, with less than half the KMs for a better trade price on my 4-wheel drive. We've had it 3 years, and it still has less mileage than the one we looked at locally. Story 64. Not exactly what you asked, but here goes. I sold cars at a big dealership for a while, and had an appointment with a lady who was looking for a Silverado. We had one, but it wasn't the color she wanted. Luckily, we had one the right color on a different lot a couple towns over. She also wanted to come back with her husband before she made the purchase. Understandable. Told her that's fine. I would go pick up that truck the next day and bring it to our lot, so that her and her husband can come check it out and pick it up. Thing is, we had a rule at our dealership which was, if a customer comes in, they can't leave until they talk to a manager, or else we would get written up or some crap. So I pull her into my manager's office and give them the lowdown of what the plan is. This mother effer then proceeds to lay into her for like 10 minutes, asking her why she has such an issue with the truck we had on our lot, why the color was such a big deal to her if her husband was going to be using the vehicle for most of the time anyway, etc. She had enough, stood up, pulled me to the side and apologized to me because she changed her mind and no longer wanted to buy from our dealership after that. I lost my crap on this guy, threw my name tag and my company shirt at him, pulled the general manager and gave him the lowdown, and told him that unless this son of a female dog gave me the $500 that he just lost me for this sale, or else I was walking out. I mean, legally, I knew he couldn't be forced to pay me, so I told my GM, thanks for everything, and bounced. Never getting into car sales again after that crap. Story 65. A little bit of a non-traditional story here. This one happened at work while we were evaluating which company we wanted to buy test equipment from. High-end oscilloscopes and network analyzers for the next 5 years. We purchased 20 or so of these a year to the tune of $60 to $120K each. Not a small amount of money. We talked to 3 companies. Company A was who we already purchased from. They have top market share. They didn't seem that interested in winning us over too much because we aren't their biggest customer. Gives us moderate price of X. No big deal. Company B is a newer kid on the block. They show us some nice features and agree to work with us. Immediately say they can add new features we'd like, and for about $5,000. Sounds good, but a little risky since they aren't as established. Company C shows us a carbon copy of Company A's product, but with fewer features, for $20K more than their original asking price. The measurement time is slower, the accuracy is worse, and the entire time they just tried to sell us on an additional software package, $10K, that we repeatedly told them we already could do what their software package did. They also claimed to have a Python API for controlling the instrument. This actually got our attention, since we use Python to control these instruments once they're in our systems. I looked it up. I've been writing Python code since 2009. It's what I do for my day job. I like to think I'm at least pretty decent. Their Python API was a script that literally could read a file containing a list of commands and write that to the instrument for you, line by line. An equivalent example would be a company saying they have a RESTful API, but in reality, it's a single endpoint where you can post some SQL code to directly affect their database. We went with Company B. They at least seemed to know what they were doing. Story 66. This summer, when I mistakenly went to a Toyota dealership, I went in, asked to talk to a salesman, and they gave me a guy that had an accent so thick that I could barely understand him. He showed me the model I was interested in looking at. When I first started my conversation with him, I said that I was just looking and was gathering information before buying the car. He understood, and when I asked what monthly payments would look like, he went to go get a more experienced salesman. This guy sat down all smug, explained all the safety features several times, and was incredulous that I would look at a used model when, quote, a new one would cost the same because of our awesome rebate. He also crapped on all the other dealerships in the area because of the fact that there's no finer product out there than the vehicle I was looking at. I explained that I was working within a budget and needed specific information. He kept on talking about the safety features. After about 40 minutes of his circular talking, I finally told him one last time that I needed to know what monthly payments would look like before I made a decision and asked if he was able to do that. His response was that when I was ready to buy the car, we could talk financing. He asked for contact information, so I gave him an email address that I don't use very often. I had a suspicion that I would have an email from him by the time I walked out the front door, and I was right. The experience that I had just solidified my choice to get the vehicle that I had looked at elsewhere earlier in the day. At the other dealership, the salesman had spent an hour and a half going over various vehicles, their prices, and what financing would look like based on different down payment amounts. And the salesman that I dealt with came in on his day off when I was ready to buy the vehicle. I will go back to this dealership when I'm ready to get another new car in 10 plus years. Story 67. Probably the time my wife and I went to buy a new car. At the time, she had an early 2000s Mercury Sable that was costing us thousands in repairs. The day it finally crapped the bed ended up being the worst possible timing for us. We had a minimal amount of down payment saved up, no time to shop around, and were on a strict budget due to other debts at the time. When we went to the dealership, we were greeted by a salesman who looked like he'd gotten out of bed that morning and decided it was dressed like a pimp day. I'm talking alligator skin shoes, bizarrely colored suit, putrid green if I remember correctly. Think 70s shag carpet shade, and that's what he was wearing. Lots of gold jewelry. I was kind of skeeved because of that and his general attitude when he greeted us, but decided, what the heck, we'll give it a go. We were very honest with him about our situation from the beginning. Told him that we were on a budget, we weren't sure how much the old car was going to be worth for a trade-in, and that we only had a certain amount we could spend. As we're walking up and down the aisles of cars looking at prices, which he chain-smoked through the entire process, rude in general, but my wife also has awful asthma and allergies that were acting up because of this. He literally stops and asks us, well, are you looking for a car or are you looking for a price tag? Probably should have left right then and there, but we let the guy walk us through not one, but 2 entire lots of cars, all just slightly out of our price range, despite us telling him multiple times that we absolutely could not afford to spend above X amount. Finally, after a while, we must have gotten tired or something because we just picked out a car we knew we weren't going to buy and sat down with him in the office while he ran some numbers with the financial people. He brings us back a piece of paper with the deal they're offering us that was some whack job number we couldn't afford. We told him thank you, we were going to lunch to talk about it, and we'd be back later. Reddit, when I tell you the desperation with which this man tried to get us to stay in that dealership was god-awful, I can't even describe it. We literally sat there for close to 10 minutes while he came up with different excuses why we shouldn't leave. I can't even remember half the crap he came up with, but some of it was just weird. Finally, I stood up. He didn't walk us to the door, just sat at his desk and watched us walk away. The one good thing that came out of it was that I took a piece of the paper he'd given us with me. We actually did go to lunch and talk about things, where we decided that he was a F-head, and even if that car had been in our price range, we still weren't going to buy it from him. We went to a different dealership and thankfully got a salesman who seemed pretty understanding about our budget, and admitted that he also drove a truck that was over 10 years old. We gave him the sheet of paper from the other dealership, told him that we absolutely could not afford something like that, and he was able to get us a much better deal on a car that was actually quite similar. Silver linings, I guess. Story 68. This happened to my parents, and it didn't stop the sale, but prevented any further business with them. I've also told this story in a different thread before. My stepfather needed to get an RV because he frequently goes on business trips. Hotels were getting too expensive, and an upcoming trip was going to be across the country. While they were looking, they found one they liked. Not too big, not too small, cozy, and just enough bells and whistles to make it comfortable for long periods. As they were getting ready to leave, the salesman asks if they want to include a satellite dish for an additional $2,000. My parents say they'll think about it, sign the papers, and go about their merry way. The next week, when they go to pick it up, there's a big, shiny satellite dish sticking out of the top of the RV. They asked why it was there, and the salesman said that he just knew they were going to want it, so signed them up for it on their behalf. They were livid. They demanded that they remove it immediately, but boy, oh boy, it was going to cost $200 to do that, and even if they did, it was going to leave holes in the roof. My parents decided to just drop it at this point because they were probably going to get it anyway. They were mad because they never actually said they would, but vowed to never go back. The satellite didn't even work well. There's too many trees and campsites. Story 69. Oh man, I have one. I leased my first car last year. I knew I wanted an SUV and was interested in the Jeep Renegade. Didn't want the most basic model, maybe 1 or 2 steps up for some added features, nothing crazy. I go to the dealership with my friend and a salesman comes up to me. For starters, the guy was maybe 23 years old and looked like someone from a Jersey Shore reunion. Okay, whatever, let's just talk about the car. The guy has no idea about anything. I ask him how much monthly payments start at. He gets up to ask his boss. I ask about airbag features. He gets up to ask his boss. Gas MPG, lane departure warning, pedestrian detection, the GPS system. He doesn't know a damn thing. His answer to everything is, oh, I don't know. Let me ask. I get it if you're new, that you might not know everything about the car. But for F's sake, how many airbags are in a car or the gas mileage? I basically write this guy off and know that if I get a Jeep, I won't be buying it from him. There are a few other dealerships in the area, but while I'm here, I might as well test drive it, right? Jersey Shore man goes to find me a 2016 Renegade. Comes back 20 minutes later. Oh yeah, we don't have any new 2016s, but we do have a used 2015 with manual transmission. I can't drive stick. And we have a top-of-the-line 2017 model way out of your price range. F it, I'm here. I'll drive the top-of-the-line model for craps and giggles. We get on the highway and the salesman starts making small talk with me, and he starts telling me about his weekend and how he got so drunk that he threw up in a bar in Long Island over the weekend. Then he's telling me how much he hates his job, and the only reason he works there is because he graduated college and his dad's friend works there and quote, I don't do manual labor, so I took this. Yeah. Drove the car to the dealership. The guy said he would meet us inside, and we left. Wound up with a VW later that day. Story 70. My dad used to go to these self-help meetings and courses in London. I would be more than happy to name and shame, but I actually can't remember the name of it, sadly. When I was visiting once, he took me along, and honestly, the whole thing was one long sales pitch. The first half they had us, the guests, the people who were members got their own talk, do an exercise to do with improving an aspect of our lives. This one woman spoke about work she wanted to do with people who had suffered miscarriages and stillbirths after having one herself. She was obviously still very vulnerable from it too. Thankfully, she left before the second half, the hard sell. They wanted me to commit €100 there and then, which I didn't have, and then I think 500 more euros for this 3-day course in the summer. I told them I couldn't, as I would be in Edinburgh for the Fringe, and had already invested a crap ton of money into that, and dropping out last minute would harm my professional reputation. So the guy suggested the next date, which was when I would be at college doing a highly vocational, practical course in the exact skills for the industry I want to work in. Oh, but this is your future. Don't you care about that? Yes, because harming my relationships with people I want to work with and missing out on the training I need is definitely going to be less of a blow than going to your crappy course, which I was pretty sure lifted verbatim from whatever self-help book is most popular that week. They managed to convince the woman next to me, who had spoken about how she had just graduated and couldn't find a job and was worried. That, plus they were pretty much reading from the cult textbook. It wasn't theistic, but oh dear God, was it culty. They filled any empty seats in the guest room with members to make it look full. They were all instantly your best friend who really cares about you, you know? They got you, or tried to get you, to disclose something personal right off the bat. No, you can't go discuss it with your family. They would want you to do it. Just commit here and now. I'm super happy here. You will be too. I was so effing angry at my dad for taking me to it. I'm super effing anxious and really bad at saying no. It gave me a panic attack on the way home because of how invasive the guy doing the selling was. I made no effort to hide how crappy it was for my dad, or his girlfriend, who had convinced him to go in the first place. Apparently, my dad spoke to the guy who was trying to sell to me and said he wanted to apologize, but in the end, he never called me when I made it clear over text I wanted a proper apology and not just for him to try and sell it to me all over again. That said, that night was a major breakthrough in my ability to say no, and not cave to pressure, so pretty proud of that. But Jesus Christ, that was crappy. I expected better from my dad. Story 71. I used to build Warhammer 40,000 minis as a hobby. Didn't last very long, although now I'm getting back into it. Back then, I went into a games workshop and mentioned that I had some Space Marines but didn't play the game. I added that I just built them however I thought looked cool and laughed that my only squad of guys was not even remotely legal for play. Should be pretty obvious, but I just want to build and paint something cool, right? Holy crap. That guy would not stop reminding me that I could get another squad and just build them with their default weapons. I told him directly that I wasn't concerned about the rules because I just wanted to build and paint them, but he kept telling me about how I could spread the heavy weapons out across different squads to make them legal for play. 10-man squads could have at most 2 heavy weapons. My squad had 4 or 5. Eventually, I managed to express enough disinterest that he let me browse in peace. I think I might have bought a command squad, but if I did, he didn't get any credit for the sale. Man was determined that I buy a tactical squad. He probably would have talked me into it if he had presented it as, you get 10 models to customize and a lot of options, but he just wouldn't listen to me when I said that I don't care about the rules of the game. Story 72. Looking for a new car, I managed to find a used FRS at a Toyota dealer across town, which my friends have had good experiences with. Since age and means can be an issue in that sort of sale, it's worth mentioning this story takes place with me in my late 20s and I'm dressed casually. I call them to confirm it's there before I drive over. I drive down to the lot and they tell me it's not there. I'm pissed, but this story is nothing new. What was fascinating was that I decided to quickly walk the used lot anyways, and the car was effing there. I'm now incredibly pissed, but I'm trying to calm down because I really need a new car, and this is basically everything I want. So I go find someone to talk about it. I know the price point because I've done my research, so I start explaining what I'm looking for in payments and instantly get, oh yeah, no way you can afford that. It costs way more. And then tries to haul me off to go look at a 4-door, which would have been more expensive. Not that I let him get that far into the pitch, but it was clear he didn't know what the FRS cost, and just assumed it was $50K plus or something. Now, it's a used car, so maybe I could understand that, but it's a effing Scion, which is an offshoot of Toyota. So I'm at a Toyota dealership with people who can't even be bothered to know their own damn catalog. I did wind up coming back the next day and basically telling the manager, hey morons, I want this car. Try not to F up a sure thing. At which point, they also questioned if I could qualify for the credit deal they had running. Spoilers. I did, to the point that once they ran my credit, they finally decided I was a functioning human who was serious about the deal. What's worse is I feel like this is a trend trying to buy cars. I'd looked at other coupes before this one, and a totally separate dealer/company also gave me the runaround, trying to get me into a effing four-door when I showed up and asked to see their coupes as if the pricing was even remotely different. I swear, I cannot understand how car sales can be this bad in this day and age of customer research. Story 73. I'm late to this party, but a few years ago we were at a show which had vendor booths, one of which was a meat company. My wife was curious, so we stopped to get information, and they set up an appointment to have a salesman come by our house. When he did, he started asking us how much we spent on groceries each month. The sales pitch involved him doing some calculations with some bizarre formula and coming up with a price to show us how we wouldn't be spending any more money each month by buying their meat. Oh, and they'll throw in a freezer for it all for free. It wasn't clear what happened when we wanted to reorder, but it was clear we couldn't get it without the freezer. It was all geared towards obfuscating how much you were actually paying for it. Have you spotted the flaw in the pitch? When we buy groceries, we buy a lot more than just meat. We buy fresh fruit, vegetables, milk, eggs, cereal, oatmeal, jelly, peanut butter, margarine, ice cream, spaghetti, tortillas, etc. And we'd still need that stuff. So our grocery bill would, in fact, increase. He'd been there a while when I pointed that out, and as soon as I did, he clicked his pen closed and started packing up. Apparently, if the mark figures that out, it's clear they aren't going to buy. I have no doubt that if we'd forked over the money, the freezer full of meat would have been delivered to our house, but it was still a scammy way to go about it. The stupid part was that we might have still been interested, but the sales tactic of trying to deceive us didn't go over well. Story 74. I wanted to get extended warranty on my car, and was told upon purchase I could get it any time before my car's current warranty ended. I had since moved, but the company has dealerships Canada-wide, so I went to the dealership in my current city and inquired. Guy was adamant that I don't need their warranty and I should get the third party they sell. My dad had that third party warranty before, and it was a pain in the ass. They fought with him against all prices and tried to refuse to cover things, and made it difficult so he would just do it himself. Dad stubborn and got his covered warranty used. I explained I didn't want the third party and I wanted the dealer's extended warranty, and to message me with pricing. So he emails me a day later, and for the 4-year 100K warranty, it was over $5,000, but the 4-year 100K was even $4,500. But at the bottom of the email, he included the third party, which was half the price, then proceeded to call me 4 times a day for the next week and a half. I was pissed, like that's 40 calls in total. So annoying. So I called my buddy in the old city I lived in that worked as a technician at the dealership I originally bought at. He said he would get the sales manager to call me in a few. So the guy calls and says he can get me the 4-year 100K for $1,500. And that's how a salesman tried to rip me off and pushed a product I didn't want because he probably got more commission. So I took my business to a place that was smarter. I can use my warranty in any dealership in Canada, and it will always be at the dealership the guy tried to overcharge me at, and they made nothing off of me. Story 75. My wife's auto lease was up, so I was taking her around to different dealerships so she could take some test drives. We hit this Hyundai dealership in Paramus, New Jersey on Route 4, and she sees a sweet-looking Veloster. We go inside and talk to the salesman, who gets the keys, and we go on the test drive. All goes well, and we head back to talk numbers. This is when it goes downhill. He brings us over to a station and gives my wife this normal chair to sit on, and pushes over this child-sized thing for me. Classic tactic to make the more dominant person feel smaller than the one in charge. I grin at my wife, and it begins. Okay, so you've got a few months left on your lease, which is no biggie. We'll cut you a check to pay that off after you sign. The payments will be some stupidly high number that wasn't going to happen, and we can get you out today. I tell him that the price is $100 more than she's paying now on her current lease, and he says, well, that's because your current vehicle isn't that great, and this one's a lot better. My wife tells him that she can't afford that and wouldn't pay it if she could. Now comes over the manager, who could be a spokesperson for hair gel and protein shakes. He sits on the edge of the desk, super close to me, and asks, so why haven't you signed yet? It's a great deal on a nice car, and the salesman here has taken a lot of time out of his afternoon to help you folks. I explain about the price, and he then tries to get my wife to turn on me by going, aren't you the one leasing the car? Why is he trying to make decisions for you? My wife looked at me and said, I think I'd rather take the bus than buy a car from these guys. Let's go get lunch. So we get up and walk towards the door, all while they're saying, hey, come back! This deal's fantastic and you won't find a better one, I can guarantee. We go 15 minutes up the road to the Hyundai in Ramsey to see how badly the Route 4 place was trying to screw us. We walk in and ask about pricing for the lease, and are told a number that's $50 less per month than she's currently paying. So she starts the paperwork, and while she's signing, I tell the guy about what happened at the other dealership. He says, "Yep, that sounds like them. You wouldn't believe the amount of business we get because of how they treat people coming in." Side note, Velosters are crap. Nice looking, but super stiff ride, and the pedal lag is enough to make you want to scream. So, common theme amongst these dozens and dozens of car sales experiences that we've read through today. It's funny how it always seems to be the second dealership that they go to that's like totally normal, and it's always the first one that you walk into where everyone's a jerk face and treats you like crap and tries to upsell you, scam you, take advantage. It's almost like the car purchasing gods force you to take this rite of passage in order to have a good experience. No one's coming in like, yeah, I walked right into the dealership, walked out a couple hours later with a brand new car. You always have to deal with the jerks first and these, annoying Jersey boys. Story 76. Not proud of this, but after struggling with some intimacy issues, I made the decision to call one of those men's health office ads you may hear on the radio. Made an appointment and drove to the medical office. Not being entirely aware of what to expect, I was surprised to learn that the treatment they offered amounted to injecting my Johnson with a needle, / their brand of super chemicals 20 minutes before intimacy. This was an immediate turnoff. Because 1, I don't like needles to begin with. 2, I've never used one before, and the idea of self-administering on my own after their 5-minute crash course in how to, pardon my French, stick a effing needle in my chicken was extremely concerning. More to the point, the salesman / doctor, who acted a little too broy for my taste, it had too casual of an atmosphere for something I hoped would be more clinical of a discussion, was really set on selling me the ease of the process. In looking at the needle, there was an injection depth setting that was never explained and had to check on after I asked about it, as if potentially skewering myself wasn't something to bring up. This, accompanied by the as of that moment not discussed fee of $3,200 for a year of treatment, with about $1,600 due as of that session, didn't pay that. I ended up leaving mainly due to the car sales-like pitch of their service, which happened to scare the crap out of me. Story 77. My wife and I needed a new car. I had been working late for a few weeks trying to finish up a huge project at work, so I had little time to do any actual research to compare cars. My wife had done all the research and was well versed on all the different makes and models we wanted to look at. So we go to Nissan. The guy takes us into his office and sits us down and starts his bullcrap spiel about Nissan and all the vehicles we don't want to look at. The whole time he's talking, he's staring right at me and ignoring my wife altogether. I'm smiling a big crap-eating grin because I know this guy is hanging himself with every word he says. Whenever my wife asks him an intelligent question, he all but ignores it, mumbling some half-assed reply and keeps looking at me. I even so much as told him he's barking up the wrong tree because I had no idea what I was talking about with this deal, and my wife was the one in the know. Instead of shifting tactics to address the actual prospective buyer in the room, he doubles down on me, figuring I'm a effing idiot who will probably pay $30K for a radio flyer wagon with a cup holder, and his sales guy boner nearly flips the desk over. At this point, we're done with this clown, but we figure F it. Let's try the car out and see if we like it. There are other Nissan dealerships in the area. We could buy from them if we like it. We had told him we're driving a Saturn, and he immediately jumped up and told us to follow him out to the showroom, where he proceeded to tell us, me, how much better a Nissan was because it had a steel hood. Saturn famously used a plastic polymer for the door and quarter panel bodies of its cars. He starts crap-talking Saturn and how awful they are, and then he actually opened the hood of the Nissan and made me hold it up to see how heavy it is. I crap you not, his approach was that Nissans are better than Saturn because the hood is made of steel. We took the car out for a test drive, really liked the handling. When we came back, he asked me if I liked it. I said, yeah, loved it. He said, great, let's get the paperwork started. I laughed and said, I don't think so. We're not buying a car from you. Good luck with your next sale. And we left. TLDR. Went to Nissan to look at cars. I knew nothing. Wife knew everything. Salesman completely ignored her and then treated me like I was an idiot when he figured out I was clueless about the cars, refusing to acknowledge wife's knowledge. Oh, and the hood was made of steel. Story 78. I was on the lookout for a new motorbike, had done research and was looking to buy a new model I had all picked out and everything. Rode up to the nearest dealer with my mom, ready to make the deal there and then if I liked it. She rides a Harley, me on my own bike, both in full gear. We walk in looking at the bikes and discussing each one. There's maybe one other customer talking to a salesman and 3 more salesmen standing around talking. One approaches and asks if I'm after some new gear. I tell him I want to buy a new bike, model, and everything, and he gives me a condescending look and suggests a few smaller secondhand bikes. Nope. F that, I'm here for a 650cc, not a 250cc like my current one. Mom and I look at each other. I just say nope, and we walk out with him following and apologizing. When I get home, I look up the next closest dealer and it's 2 hours away. I can't get out there and physically look at the bike, so I email one of the salesmen. He gets back to me in about 30 minutes, asks what color I want, and orders it in for me, emailing me the contract so I can read it. 2 weeks later, I'm spending 10 minutes signing papers to an interest-free for 2 years and $1,000 off loan, picking out new saddlebags for it, and then riding away on a bike with 3 kilometers on the clock and a full tank of 98, happy as. 4 years later, I only go to the first shop if I absolutely have to, and that's only because all the staff have changed. The second shop sends me vouchers and stuff every year on my birthday, and the day I bought my bike, if they weren't so far, I would send my bike there for repairs. Story 79. Boy, sure are a lot of car stories here. How about another? I'm about 25. I have some solid credit and a decent job. Recently married. Our combined income gives us some unprecedented comfort. We're not rich, but we're past the holy crap, how's the checking account overdrawn phase. I've been a member of USAA since I was 18. They were an obvious choice for financing for me. I hated dealing with dealership financing people. How it works is you call, get approved up to X amount of dollars, then you print out a thing that looks like a check. You bring it to the dealership and it contains all the info and instructions for them to get paid. Routing and account number where USAA is to send the money, what documents need to be faxed to them in advance, all good. The obvious downside is that the dealership, if it's not a preferred USAA dealership, needs to wait 1 to 3 days to get their money. Still, they tell me, many dealerships will let you walk with the keys while the paperwork settles. I soon discovered that most dealerships hate, with a burning passion, a-holes who bring their own financing. Because that wasn't enough hatred for me, I also went in having done a few months' worth of research on what I wanted, what I didn't want, and how much I was willing to pay. I had no idea this would ruin the day for so many people. I had my eyes set on the Subaru Legacy. I had narrowed it down to the Legacy or the Honda Accord. The Legacy had all-wheel drive and better gas mileage, so I went to 2 dealerships to give them both a drive on the same day so I could easily compare them. 1. The Honda dealership. The Honda place was a regular dealership. The Subaru was a no-haggle place. The Honda dealership hated me more for having done my research than anything. Salesman was clearly in his element when it came to saying whatever popped into his head with confidence. Whenever I would challenge his very wrong assertions, he got flustered. I was very upfront about what I was doing, how I was going to drive the Accord, go a few blocks over to the Subaru dealership and test drive the Legacy, decide and purchase a car that day. Evidently, he didn't want me to leave the dealership and lose the sale, so he decided to just start making up blatant lies about Subaru. I mean, if you like the Subaru, that's fine, but did you know that the Subaru actually failed its crash tests? Is that why IIHS says it has slightly higher ratings than the Accord? Things like that. I also asked him how a car on the market could fail its crash tests. As if you could crash test a car, it shows that a fender bender will kill everyone inside, and they shrug and sell it in a fancy color. So he decided to tell me how dishonest the Subaru people are. Frankly, after a half-hour test drive experience, I was just tired of listening to this guy. I had to tell him at least 4 times to stop talking during the drive because I wanted to listen to the transmission as I was taking hills and things. Dude would just not shut up and would not shut up about things he had no reason to talk about. He was also insistent that I couldn't use my USAA financing there and I had to use their financing. Then he tried to tell me that USAA was lying to me about my interest rate, something like 1.99% for 4 years, and tried to pull lines like, I've never even heard of this. What is it? UUAA? You should be careful. There are a lot of scams online, and it sounds like you might have been taken in by one. I left there and decided, if I choose the Accord, I wasn't buying it from that guy. 2. Subaru. Let me tell you, I'm all about no-haggle places after this purchase. I asked to test drive the Legacy. They tossed some keys my way and told me to have fun. I commented that I'd probably be back within 15 minutes. Sales guy shrugged and said, no rush, we close at 8. Take it for an hour or 2. You live nearby? Take a spin by your house and see how it looks in the driveway. I knew what I wanted. They didn't want to force other things on me when I made that clear. After driving the Legacy, I decided that this was my car. So I go back, hand them the financing paperwork, and start signing things. Unlike the Honda dealership, the price was listed clearly on the car, and it just happened to be around 2.5K under MSRP. Now, they were definitely disappointed that I brought my own financing. They were even more disappointed that I had such a good interest rate and they couldn't compete with it. They acted out by not letting me take the car same day. When I called my bank 3 days later to check on the status of things, they did a three-way call with the dealership finance guy who, not realizing I was on the phone, was a rude a-hole to my bank and told them that the banks he had contracted with get first priority. I called my dealership GM, bickered him out, and he offered to have my new car delivered to my office, and the guy who would bring it would pick up my trade-in while he was there. So one night was a straight nope, and the other came dangerously close, though they made it right. Like night and day, man.